and Restream, now streaming on 4 networks instead of 1. Last week, we just beta tested everything on YouTube, but I have expanded to Kick, Facebook Live, and Twitch. So not only are we live on Restream's YouTube channel, we're automatically on Facebook Live now as well, and Restream takes the time to promote the content in Facebook groups as well as the Facebook page for us. So this is all being live streamed, and I've figured out some cool stuff on the Restream news ticker. There's a news ticker where you could say follow us on Twitter, or we can actually post the draft picks in the Restream thing. I'm not sure I could do that. That's a lot with all the typing I got to do. We'll figure that out later. But I've also figured out how to screen share, so I can actually load my predictions from the simulator up on the screen share later in the show. And I've got the Draft Utopia logo in the background for Restream as well. But let's get to the news. I don't want to talk about all these cool additions to Restream. I'm just happy everything's flowing smoothly so far. But let's start with the 3-team trade. This was a pretty big trade. San Jose Sharks, Montreal Expos, and Pittsburgh Penguins engaged in a 3-team trade in the NHL. And here's what the Montreal Canadiens got: Jeff Petrie, Penguins backup goalie Casey DeSmith, Nathan Laguerre, and a 2025 second-round pick. San Jose got Mikael Granlund, who is a third or fourth line center on the Penguins, John Ruda, Mike Hoffman, who was on Montreal, and a 2024 first-round pick. The Penguins got star defenseman Erik Karlsson, who won the Norris Trophy for best defenseman with 101 points in the regular season last year, Rem Pitlick, Dylan Hamaliuk, and a 2026 third-round pick. Not a bad deal for all 3 teams, but the biggest winner, in my opinion, has to be the Pittsburgh Penguins, because not only did they get the best defenseman in the NHL last year from a production standpoint during the regular season. This goes back to the NHL free agency show, Joey, where I said if Kyle Dubas could find a way to get Erik Karlsson, re-sign Tristan Jarry, and get Alex Nedeljkovic, the backup, who they got as a backup goalie, if he could find a way to pull off all 3 of those moves while staying under the cap, Pittsburgh Penguins could be a dark horse team to win the Eastern Conference in the NHL. And we're not previewing NHL teams until next month, but Kyle Dubas actually did it. He actually pulled off a 3-team trade with San Jose and Montreal to get Erik Karlsson, who was being rumored to be on the trade market after his peak season with 101 points, 26 goals, 75 assists, 101 points. I'll double check the numbers here for a second. I texted you them before the show, but here we go. Erik Karlsson had 25 goals, 76 assists, 101 points in 82 games. He had a minus 26 plus-minus ratio, which means he gave up 127 goals when he was on the ice, but he also scored 101 points, which is remarkable for a defenseman. But yeah, that he's now on the Penguins with Letang. So whenever you're playing the Pittsburgh Penguins, whenever Connor Bedard has to come to Pittsburgh, he's going to have to face both Chris Letang, who's been the number 1 defenseman on the Penguins since Crosby's second year in the league back in 06-07. And he's going to have to face Erik Karlsson on that top line. That is not going to be an easy feat for Connor Bedard in the season opener. But what do you think of that trade for the Penguins? That's a big trade. And most situations I'd be against trading a first-round pick, but I think Karlsson's going to elevate the Penguins. There's not really a dominant team in the Eastern Conference right now. And every NHL mock draft I've read for 2024 either has Edmonton, Vegas, Colorado, Dallas, or I'm trying to think of a 5th team, Seattle winning the 2024 Stanley Cup. I have not seen an NHL mock draft having an Eastern Conference champion win the Stanley Cup yet, Joey. So what that tells me is And we both agreed on this when the NHL offseason started, that the Western Conference just looked better than the East at the moment. But one team in the East that I can see actually winning the Cup is Pittsburgh, and it's in large part due to this trade for Erik Karlsson that Kyle Dubas pulled off. I wouldn't be surprised if we got a Pittsburgh-Toronto Eastern Conference Finals where Dubas beat his former employers in the conference title. But go ahead, Joey.
Well, this is something that we talked about. I think we talked about it off the air. Is that Pittsburgh did have a couple of really nice goalies, and they didn't need both of them. One was good at staying healthy. Two really good goalies. Or goalkeepers. You can really do a lot with that and turning them into whether they be draft picks or other types of star players. And we talked about it a few weeks ago, and guess what? Pittsburgh did it. So I think it was a great move for Pittsburgh. They had to do things a little bit differently than the NHL usually does, because NHL doesn't normally do 3-team trades and doing all the roundabout and stuff. They're usually pretty straightforward. But they managed it. They pulled it off. And I think they did a really good job of it. They made it work. So hats off to Pittsburgh. I think they're in a much better place now than they were yesterday.
Yeah, because this was a team that barely missed the playoffs last year. And now all of a sudden they got the one defenseman they needed to pair with Letang. And this Pittsburgh team honestly might be better than the teams that won it all in 2016 and 2017. I don't know if the goaltending will be on par with Matt Murray and Marc-Andre Fleury, but at the same time, I think the blue line's a lot stronger. And Pittsburgh having a 1-2 punch on their first line of the blue line is going to make this team a lot more difficult to game plan against, in my opinion. So we'll see what happens. Crosby, Letang, Malkin, the core guys are there, and now you add Erik Karlsson to that group. You lose Jason Zucker, but you pick up Riley Smith, the third-line left winger, and one of the two alternate captains on the Vegas Golden Knights Stanley Cup team. So Vegas doesn't have that third-line forward with leadership qualities anymore. And Vegas lost one of their assistant coaches to Dallas. So I think that definitely is going to make things interesting, but Pittsburgh made a really good move, and this is the move they needed to make to assert themselves as the front runner in the East, because nobody really did anything significant to run away with the Eastern Conference. And maybe Pittsburgh's division rival, the New York Rangers, were the favorite, in my opinion, prior to this move. Now I think Pittsburgh is the favorite, but we'll see. I'm not going to dive too much into my NHL predictions. I will save that for this month. We got through this topic pretty quick. Go ahead.
I do think it's too early for you to dive into your NHL predictions anyway.
I wait till September to do that. It's August.
We haven't started camps. We haven't gone through all the off-season moves yet.
It's early. It's a little too early. It's early to do that because I usually do that in the first 4 weeks of September. I try to knock out an NHL division during each week of September. And obviously it's too early for that. And I like what San Jose got. San Jose got a second first-round pick in 2024. I thought that was a smart move. And Montreal getting Casey DeSmith, who was Pittsburgh's backup goalie last year, as a stopgap until Carey Price recovers from his injury, that's a solid move for them as well. So I don't think any of these teams came out horribly in this trade, but the big winner for me has to be Pittsburgh.
Yeah, and like I said, you're looking at a really interesting situation because Pittsburgh did have two starting caliber players, even if he's a stopgap, because they do have a really good goalie or goalkeeper.
Tristan Jarry's a two-time All-Star. Two-time All-Star. I know he's had some injury history, but he's a two-time All-Star. And Alex Nedeljkovic had some moments in Carolina and Detroit. I like him as a backup, so I think it's a solid move.
It really is. It was a good strategic move because if he's not going to be healthy to start the season, now you have a quality starter as your backup to work with that. So it was a very strategic move, and it was one that you can respect because they're hoping for the best, preparing for the worst, and I can never fault a team for doing that.
And Pittsburgh's two choices were either blow up the team and go through a rebuild or continue to try to win now. And after extending Malkin and Letang last offseason, and with Crosby's contract coming up in 2025, Pittsburgh pretty much had to make a decision. Do we try to go all in now? 2025 NHL free agency is going to be insane if Edmonton lets Connor McDavid hit the market and Pittsburgh lets Sidney Crosby hit the market. I don't think either team is dumb enough to let their best players hit the market. But, like, if both players hit the market, that would be an insane free agency, Joey. It would be the LeBron James free agency times 2.
Well, I'm never a fan of those type of free agent markets where the player just makes such a spectacle out of it. It's like, dude, you make millions of dollars for playing a kid's game. Not a spectacle. You're embarrassing yourself. Sign with a new team. Enjoy your money. Have fun playing the game.
I don't think they would have a press conference like LeBron did. I'm just saying there would be so much chaos in the NHL if that happened.
Okay, well, hype is fine. It's just don't turn it into a spectacle because...
Don't turn it into a press conference and announce what team you're going to.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like, don't turn it into something just because you decided not to go to college and didn't have your signing day. I mean, I can understand kids doing it, going into college. This is your big day. This might be the biggest day of your life.
I don't think either player's going to hit the market. Crosby's the best player on the Penguins and McDavid's the best player on the Oilers. I know they're both UFAs in 2025 right now, but I have a feeling both players are going to get extended this next offseason in 2024.
I was going to say, I don't think either one's going to hit free agency. I think they're both going to get extended.
Yeah, they're both going to get extended after this upcoming NHL season, most likely. I think that's the big reason why Edmonton hasn't extended Draisaitl yet, because Draisaitl's a 2024 free agent, but as good as he is as a very good line 2 center, you're not extending him if it means losing Connor McDavid. You're just not. So he might end up going somewhere else. We've spent 13 minutes talking about hockey. You want to pivot to college football now, or do you have anything else you want to add to this trade for Montreal and San Jose?
No, it was a decent trade for everybody. I just think Pittsburgh came out of it the big winner. And I thought the acquisition of Pittsburgh's goalie was a very good strategic move. I don't think there are any losers, but I think Pittsburgh was a big winner. Yes,
that's pretty much my thought process as well, Joey. All right, we're officially ready for the funeral of the Pac-12, or the official last season of the Pac-12 in college football. Yeah, we've got like a thumbnail of the meme with the guy at the funeral. That's pretty much our thumbnail for this week, and it's got the Pac-12 logo on the graveyard. It's pretty messed up. You're laughing, I'm laughing, we're having a good time. But
some Halloween bullshit you got going on there.
Yep, but yeah, I'm going to Pac-12 prospects for the 2024 NFL draft. I'm going to look at some of these teams in the Pac-12. I think there are 3 serious contenders, and then there's everybody else. I'll start with the 2 bottom feeders. Right now, Stanford and Arizona State are the 2 bottom feeders in the Pac-12. Stanford's top NFL prospect is Benjamin Urosek. He is a senior tight end, and we both know Stanford, they have got a good track record with tight ends, dating back to Colby Kobe Fleener, and then they had Zach Ertz in 2013. So ever since those two tight ends came into the NFL, Stanford has just been one of these teams, Joey, that's consistently churned out talent at the tight end position in the NFL draft. Austin Hooper. I know Hooper's not the guy he used to be, but like Stanford's one of these programs that's consistently churned out talent at the tight end position.
Stanford has, since Harbaugh first took over back in the day, he really turned that program into a football program, not just a school of higher learning. And I think that still continues today. I still like a lot of their prospects. I like a lot of what they do. I'm not saying they're a super powerhouse or anything, but they've had a couple quarterbacks I like. They've had some offensive linemen we both liked. They've had some tight ends we've liked. I mean, I think they even had a receiver sprinkled in there somewhere that we both thought was going to be really good. So, I mean, since the days of Harbaugh, this has been a really good football program. And not getting into foreshadowing, because I'm really interested where they're going to end up, I will still say, I mean, we would be remiss to say they have no chance in this interesting final year, but at the same time,
there's 9 teams in the Pac-12 with NFL quarterback prospects. Out of the 12 Pac-12 teams, 9 of them have NFL prospects. This feels like the SEC last year, because last year in the SEC, you had like Anthony Richardson, Hendon Hooker, Stetson Bennett, Will Levis, Bryce Young. I mean, Jaden Daniels came into LSU through the transfer portal.
We don't mention banana eaters here, or at least we don't mention people who put mayonnaise in their coffee as creamer.
I wasn't trying to mention Levis. I'm just saying the SEC had so much NFL talent at the quarterback position last year. Will Rogers as well, who's a senior this year, but like SEC had so much talent at quarterback, it wasn't even funny. That's the Pac-12 this year, essentially. So I think the fact that Stanford, Cal, and Arizona are the only 3 teams without an NFL prospect at quarterback makes them the bottom feeders of the conference. And speaking of Arizona State, they did get Notre Dame's freshman quarterback, May, who went 8-2. I believe his name is Drew Pine. Drew Pine, who went 8-2 as a freshman at Notre Dame. He's now the starting quarterback at Arizona State this season. So I'm not particularly high on Pine, but at the same time, Arizona State does have Elijah Badger at wide receiver. And, you know, ever since N'Keal Harry and Brandon Ayuk got drafted in the first round for Arizona State has slowly turned into a wide receiver factory. Frank Darby in 2021. It feels like they haven't had an NFL receiver in a few years now, Joey, but they have one this year in Elijah Badger, who's a junior at Arizona State, as well as their best player. Will he declare for the draft, go back for a senior year, enter the transfer portal? That remains to be seen with Elijah Badger, but he is the best player on this Arizona State football team, as Elijah Badger had 70 receptions, 866 yards, and 7 touchdowns with the Sun Devils last year.
Yeah, and this is the interesting part, is that you and I 2 years ago, because I remember Badger pretty well, we were talking about him. I don't know if he actually won or not, but we were talking about him as potential freshman of the year. We had really high hopes for this guy. And I'm loving that he is now looking at, if he has a huge season this year, even if he has the same type of season this year he had last year, we're talking potential top 15 pick here.
He had a really good freshman season with Jaden Daniels. And he lost his quarterback and was still able to put up 70 receptions, 866 yards, and 7 touchdowns without a good quarterback, which are respectable numbers. Now he gets Drew Pine, who went 8-2 at Notre Dame as a freshman, as his new starting quarterback. And you would think 75 receptions, 1,000 yards, maybe 9 or 10 touchdowns is on the table with this young man for Arizona State this season.
I do. I think that he could have, an incredible season this year. The big thing, though, that I'm looking at with him is we said that Cedric Tillman was a second-round pick with potential to be a mid-first-round pick, and he got injured, a bad high ankle sprain. What is going to happen to his draft stock if he comes out barn burners like Tillman did in the first 2 games, high ankle sprain, and goes? Because then it really becomes guesswork.
Agreed.
What do you think he's going to be? And that's what's going to either make his not only draft stock, but honestly could make Arizona State season. Because if this happens to him the same way it happened to Tillman, I don't see Arizona State with that second guy that can step up.
Yeah, they don't have a second. Arizona's only got 5 returning starters on offense. They have Gilroy as their number 2 receiver, and Giovanni Sanders is their only other returning starter at wide receiver. Isaiah Glass is their only returning starter at left tackle. And then the 2 returning starters at tight end and right tackle are competing for starting jobs. They're not even guaranteed those jobs. So, Arizona State is going to be largely dependent on the Drew Pine-Elijah Badger connection. And to make matters worse, Arizona State's running back had 0 rushing touchdowns last year. But to be fair, he only had 14 carries for 67 rushing yards. So, but yeah, that's a little concerning as well. Arizona's current starting running back had 0 rushing touchdowns. So,
yeah, and I wanted to use Tennessee as an example because Tennessee does have, they had the quarterback, but instead of 1 receiver, they had 2 receivers. So it just seemed like
and Arizona State's been a wide receiver factory in recent years. Ayuk.
Oh, yeah.
They had N'Keal Harry, Brandon Ayuk, Frank Darby. All 3 of those guys got drafted in 2019, 2020, and 2021.
Yeah,
so they've been a receiver factory.
The 2 receiver factors in college football have been Arizona State and Texas Tech. So to say that, one of them only has 1 big-time receiver, that doesn't happen too often. And the chance of injury when you only have 1 really good receiver is very real. Even with 2, even if you only have 2, because let's face it, last year, only 2 for Tennessee, 1 of them went down. Right now in college football, you have to have 3. They have 1. That's concerning.
Exactly. And there's a lot of teams in this conference. But we're going to get to the next team, the Cal Golden Bears. They have Jackson Sermon. Jackson Sermon, a 6'3", 235-pound linebacker. He was a backup on the Washington Huskies, but he left Washington to go to the Cal Golden Bears through the transfer portal, and he broke out last year with 104 total tackles. He actually led the Pac-12 in tackles last season. But Jackson Sermon is one of these players you got to keep an eye on. He was the only player in the Pac-12 to exceed 100 tackles last year, Jackson Sermon. So he's the 1 tackling machine in the Pac-12 this season. And any ability Cal has to win games is going to depend on Sermon, because you've seen the last 2 or 3 years, a lot of the Cal Golden Bears talent in the NFL draft has come from the defensive side of the ball. I mean, Daniel Scott in 2023. I know Cal's had some other players at safety and corner in recent drafts. I know they had the safety from Cal in the 2020 draft that was at the Senior Bowl. I've got it in my Senior Bowl notebook. Ashton Davis. They've had some good talent at safety and corner But now you get Jackson Sermon. I think Sermon California goes as far as Jackson Sermon can take them. I mean, this was a team that went 4-8 last year. They started the year 2-0, but they played UC Davis and UNLV. Cal plays at North Texas in week 1, and then the Cal Golden Bears host Auburn in week 2. It's the first time a Pac-12 team has hosted Auburn since Pac-12 teams played Auburn since Matt Leinart faced Auburn back in his first career college start. I know they showed that on the USC 30 for 30 on ESPN, but like this is the Pac-12's first game against Auburn since Matt Leinart's first college start. That's a pretty crazy stat I found, Joey. But any thoughts on this Cal Golden Bears team? I mean, I know it's not an exciting team to talk about, and we are going to start to get into some of the more exciting teams after this. So. Cal's projected to finish 9th ahead of Colorado. I have them at 10th because they're the only team without a NFL quarterback left on the board. But Jackson Sermon they're projected to go 5-7. And I think if they got 5 wins, that would be considered a successful season, considering they're one of the 3 teams in this conference without a quarterback.
Well, I expect Cal to be competitive. Maybe not win more than 6 games, but be competitive. Cal always has some of the more athletic players because, let's face it, they're in California. They're always going to get great athletes. Kind of like Miami or Florida. They're in Miami. They're always going to get great athletes. So I expect them to be competitive, but I don't expect them to win more than 6 games.
Yeah, that's fair evaluation. We do have a guest in the chat on Restream. Thank you for joining us. But let's get to the Colorado Buffaloes. They're the next team up. They're projected to finish 10th. I have them in 9th. I think their ceiling is 6-6 and their floor is 4-8. It depends on what they do in the opener against TCU, though. I look at 2 players in Colorado. You have Shadur Sanders at quarterback and Travis Hunter, the wide receiver / corner. If either player is draft eligible this year, they could be fun to scout. And if not, there's a possibility that Prime says, you guys both need another year of development. The Pac-12 will be easier to win without Texas, without Oklahoma in the conference. And maybe next year's the year Colorado makes their mark as like a competitive team. I could definitely see Colorado struggling this year and then being more competitive. Because I know Deion's going to change the culture there. But I could also see him leaving for Florida State once Florida State assuming Florida State leaves the ACC and goes to the SEC, I could see them making a change at that point. But as long as Mike Norwell continues to do a good job with Florida State, I don't think there will be a coaching change there because Norwell really did a great job with the Seminoles last year, exceeding a lot of expectations. So as much as fans want to speculate on Deion Sanders returning to Florida State, I just don't think it's in the cards at this point. But you look at this Colorado Buffaloes team, I think their floor is 4-8 and the ceiling's 6-6. And that's assuming they beat TCU in the opener and then they beat Nebraska the following week at home. So that's really what I'm looking at with them. You got any thoughts on this Buffaloes team before we get to the next team on our list?
Buffalo, not really.
I've got 2 teams going 6-6. Arizona and Washington State. I'm debating which team. I think I have Washington State winning the tiebreaker. Okay, so we'll talk about Arizona at 8. But I have both teams at 6-6. Arizona's got a lot of talent on offense this year. If their receiver hadn't left, their receiver Dorian Zinger left Arizona to go to USC, which kind of sucks. But Arizona, they've got Jaden DeLaura. Jaden DeLaura exceeded 3,500 passing yards at quarterback last season, Joey. Jordan Morgan could be a potential first-round pick in the 2024 NFL draft at left tackle. I mean, Dorian Zinger and Jacob Cowing are both capable of exceeding 1,000 receiving yards. Zinger left Arizona to go to USC, but Cowing is going to be the number one wide receiver. Michael Wiley had over 900 rushing yards at running back, and Tanner McLachlan is the starting tight end for Arizona entering his senior year. Some think he's Arizona's best tight end since Gronkowski played at Arizona, but Arizona's stacked everywhere on the offense this year. I don't remember an Arizona team that had this much talent on offense. Now, I don't see a lot of defensive talent there, but I do think this is a team that can win 6 games and return to a bowl game, Joey. I think a few years ago, Arizona made the Fiesta Bowl against Boise State. I think that was like 5 or 6 years ago, but yeah, I think Arizona can surprise some people and make a bowl game with all the offensive talent they have.
The last time I remember Arizona with this much offensive talent was 2012, I think.
Was 2011? Was that the Nick Foles draft year?
Nick Foles. Yeah, it was Nick Foles, Andrew Luck, that draft year.
Yeah.
And that was the last time I saw Arizona with that much talent. And the thing is, though, Arizona is such an uneasy school, unbalanced. And what I mean by that is, one year, I'm like, we covered them, great defensive talent. Next year, good offensive talent. Next year, great defensive talent. Next year, no talent. They never have everything all at once, which is a shame. It really is a shame because I do think they have a good program, but they never seem to be able to pull it all together. And I don't think their defense this year matches up with their offense.
It doesn't.
It's kind of the same old, same old.
Arizona only has 3 returning starters on defense. 2 of those 3 returning starters are competing for starter spots. And the only stable piece is Jacob Manu, who led the Arizona Wildcats in tackles with 54 and sacks with 3 at inside linebacker. Manu is really only the stable piece. And I wouldn't call Manu a star player. He's an impact player, yes. Star player, no. So, yeah, that's why I think Arizona's in a really interesting spot. And you look at their schedule to begin the year. Northern Arizona, they'll win that. They'll lose to Will Rogers and Mississippi State. They'll beat UTEP and Stanford, I think. They should be 3-1, but they play Washington, USC. They play at Washington State, the next team we're going to preview. They play Oregon State. They play UCLA. They play Utah. I mean, they play a lot of tough teams this year. I think they could go 6-6 and make a bowl game, but that's their ceiling, despite the surplus of offensive talent on display.
Yeah, tough schedules tend to do that to teams.
Yeah, Washington State's the next team we're going to preview. Washington State has Cameron Ward at quarterback, Nakia Watson at running back, with them being the 2 impact players on that Washington State Cougars offense. Ron Stone Jr. and Brennan Jackson both return at defensive end for the Huskies. Ahmad McCullough, a right outside linebacker from Maryland that Washington State obtained in the transfer portal, is replacing Day and Henley. Chai Smith-Wade is the number 1 corner on the Cougars. He's coming back. And Sam Lockett III is one of the better free safeties in the Pac-12 who you need to keep an eye on if you're a Washington State fan, as Chow Smith. It's Chow Smith-Wade, not Chai Smith-Wade. It's Chow Smith-Wade. Chow Smith-Wade's the only first-team player on Washington State's defense at corner. But Sam Lockett III is a really nice impact safety. And they also have the Ron Stone Jr. and Brennan Jackson edge rusher tandem. So they have the edge rushers. They have the number one corner. They have Lockett. So they have and they got a linebacker in the transfer portal that might be able to replace Day and Henley. So I like what Washington State did as a whole. I have them at 6-6, making a bowl game. And since I have them beating Arizona head to head, they end up at number 7 on these rankings. And then we get to the 8-4 teams, the 9-3 teams, the contenders in the top 6. But yeah, I've got Washington at number 7 on my list here. And I watched Cam Ward. The accuracy is there. The throwing power is there. The footwork's there. He just needs to fix his progressions, and he's aces. If he can fix his progressions, Cam Ward is a guy who could legitimately enter the first-round conversation. I have a second-round grade on him at the moment, but I think he's a consensus third-round prospect at the moment for the 2024 NFL draft. So Ward, watching him, how is he going to develop as far as his progressions go? Because everything else is there, the arm, the legs, the dual threat ability, the footwork, everything else is there. He just has to fix his progressions. And if he can do that, I think he can sneak into day 1 of the draft. But right now, I'd probably give him a second or third round grade in day 2. You got any thoughts on Washington State before we get to our top 6 teams?
No, I really think Washington State is in for a downturn this year. I don't think they're as good as they were last year. I don't think they're as good as they were the year before. I don't think they're going to be bad, but I don't think they're going to be as good as the previous years.
Yeah, and they don't have Dane Henley. I'm not sure the linebacker they got through the transfer portal is a viable replacement, but I do like their edge rushers and their corner, but we'll see. Up next, it is UCLA. UCLA only has 3 players. I have UCLA finishing 8-4, and they have 2 players, impact players on offense that they got, one through recruiting, one through the transfer portal, and they've got 1 impact player on defense. So they've got Dante Moore replacing Dorian Thompson-Robinson, and Dante Moore is the one quarterback from the 2023 high school recruiting class that Wes Langley is raved about that is projected to start as a freshman. And this is a guy who's been training with Trey Lance and Patrick Mahomes before even enrolling in UCLA. He went to like a training session with Mahomes, and he asked if he could throw with them. And Mahomes was like, yeah, you can hang out with us, but you've got to be back at your house by 5 or 6 or whatever. Your family needs you back. But yeah, you can throw with us for a day. You can learn under us. So he's a high school quarterback, but he's already got that hands-on mentorship from Patrick Mahomes. So, and he's got a nil deal. So I'm kind of interested to see what Chip Kelly does with him after coaching Dorian Thompson-Robinson at UCLA. And it's going to be interesting because I think the last time UCLA was in the Pac-12 title game, I think it was Brett Hundley's freshman year. So they never got to one with Rosie or DTR.
Well, here's the thing. They lost their star quarterback to the draft.
But they have another star quarterback coming in. They have a star quarterback coming in. But I don't know if they've got a viable replacement for Bobo. And they did lose Zach Charbonnet. But they addressed running back in the transfer portal. Running back in the transfer portal that UCLA running back. Yeah, UCLA got Carson Steele. Carson Steele had over 1,500 rushing yards at Ball State last season, Joey. So Chip Kelly was able to poach Carson Steele away from Ball State. That's going to help Dante Moore with his development as a freshman, I think. But outside of Carson Steele and Dante Moore, the only other player the Bruins have is Laitu Latu, a defensive end who led the Pac-12 with 10.5 sacks. There's really nothing else besides those 3 impact players.
But here's my thought. Yes, they do have a couple stars coming in, but you're looking at a quarterback that may not be as proven. And in that thought, you have 2-star receivers, a good number 3 receiver.
UCLA only has 3
the running
returning
back coming in.
starters. 3 returning starters. At wide receiver, Ken Brown, center Duke Clemens, and Garrett DiGiorgio at right tackle, who is a starting right tackle as a true freshman. Those are your only returning starters, Joey. Everybody else is entering.
I forget his name last year. He was the number 3 receiver last year. I think he was the number 3. And I watched a couple games.
Was it Cam Brown? 24 receptions, 362 yards, 3 receiving touchdowns, because that's their best receiver coming back.
Might have been because he was a big play guy last year, and I really liked what I was seeing out of him in limited action, and I thought he had. I think I mentioned him to you in a text or something. But I thought he had breakout talent.
Yeah, and I'm going through the depth chart here for UCLA. I think UCLA's front 7 is good. They've got 2 senior corners in John Humphrey and Kenny Churchwell III. Guys, I probably should have wrote down in my notes, but like when I'm looking through the team's rosters, I'm mainly looking at the first team. I'm looking at the impact player that's mentioned in the magazine. I'm looking at, is this player a highly recruited player? Is this player a transfer portal player who made an impact at a smaller school? And is this a projected first-team guy? And if the player doesn't meet that criteria, sometimes I overlook that player at the college level. But
you hurt me. That when I text you about somebody, it's more for me because you know how terrible I am with names, and that you can always come up with the name knowing the player I'm talking about. So I'm hurt that you didn't write this one down. I am so hurt.
I'm sorry you're hurt.
Nothing that can.
But Bowling Green.
Nothing that can ebb this pain.
Jordan Anderson, the free safety at Bowling Green, is transferring to UCLA as well. So, you know, UCLA's poaching a lot of talent away from the MAC conference.
Well, he was somebody that I thought could also transition to guard. So that could be an interesting development there. Because if you can get starting interior linemen out of this now, that also would impact the quality of the quarterback play.
Which line are you talking about?
I'm interested to see how that one turns out.
Clemens or DiGiorgio? Because I think UCLA could win their first 3 games. They'll probably lose to Utah. I have them beating Washington State. I have them losing to Oregon State. Stanford, Colorado should be wins. I think they lose to Arizona in a trap game. And then I think they beat Arizona State and Cal at home, but lose to USC. I got 8-4 for the Bruins.
Well, I think they could very easily beat Utah. I think Utah did lose a couple players to the NFL draft on defense. And I think those wide receivers, and if the protection's good for that quarterback, with the running back coming in to push the load, I think that could be major upset in week 1 and make people say, hey, we're still UCLA, we're still big time, we can still get the job done.
I've got 4 impact players on Utah, 3 on UCLA, and Utah's hosting UCLA. Last year, UCLA hosted Utah, and you got to see DTR pick apart Utah's defense. But I've got 4 impact players on Utah. Cameron Rising at quarterback, Brant Kuth at tight end. Remember, Kincaid and Kuth were a very good 1-2 punch at tight end before Kuth's injury last year. Now Kuth is healthy. Satal Lomea is the left tackle for Utah, and Cole Bishop's the starting strong safety for the Utah Utes. He's like the one impact player that Utah has on defense. But I think Utah's an 8-4 team.
I was pretty sure they lost at least one of their corners to the NFL.
Yeah, they lost Clark Phillips to Atlanta. Clark Phillips III.
Phillips, yes.
He got injured in training camp, but he was good at nickel when he was healthy.
Oh, well, yeah. Yeah, because I didn't know he got injured in training camp. But, I'm
and Cole Bishop led UCLA in tackles as a sophomore. He did. Cole Bishop led Utah with 83 tackles as a sophomore. And Lander Barton, the highly touted freshman redshirt that highly touted freshman that Utah thought they could replace Devin Lloyd with, he didn't really, he had to transition a little bit. So I think it will be interesting to see what happens with Utah moving forward this season. But I still think Utah and UCLA, both of them have a case for being the 5th best team. But I think both teams max out at 8-4. And I have both of those teams finishing outside of the top 4 in the Pac-12. Utah's projected to finish 3rd according to Athlon Sports, but I don't think they do that well, Joey. I'm with you.
I have questions about both teams. Utah, mainly its youth. It's lost a lot of its veteran players over the last couple of years. It's got a lot of youth coming in, a lot of talented youth, but still a lot of youth, still a lot of guys that are going to be feeling their way around. They've got a couple strong leaders, so hopefully that works in their favor. With UCLA, I have the questions about, hey, new quarterback come in, always a star quarterback replacement. It's always going to be a question mark, no matter how good they are or what they've done before. That's just the way it is. And then, like you said, their defense isn't exactly, this defense that's going to blow the world away. I think they've got a couple talented pass rushers. I think they've got a couple talented corners and a talented safety. But if you have pretty talented, and pretty talented does not exactly blow the world away. So, I mean, there are questions about both teams, but both teams are really talented. So, I'm not going to say one is better than the other, because if you look at their question marks, they got about the same amount of question marks. They're just in different areas. So, I'm not going to say one's better than the other, but I think of most people are picking Utah. I think they may be unpleasantly surprised, because I think UCLA could knock them off in week 1.
Well, Utah and UCLA meet in week 4, but it's a 5A, it's a 6A, 6. It's a 5A, 5B thing for me.
Yeah.
I think they're both 5 and 6 in the Pac-12, but it's a 5A, 5B thing for me, Joey.
Yeah, I thought they met in week 1. They meet in week 4. Whatever, there could be an upset there if people are still picking.
Graham Mertz has been officially named the starting quarterback for the Florida Gators. The former Wisconsin Badgers quarterback, Graham Mertz, will be replacing Anthony Richardson, and it'll be him facing the Utah Utes in Utah in week 1 after Florida upset Utah last year.
That's not a bad one. It's like, because I know we'll get into him when we
do our SEC preview in 2 weeks, but yeah.
At the same time, it's like, I want to mention, since you mentioned him, it's like I liked him at Wisconsin, because I still follow the Big Ten even today. And so, I'm interested to see how because we know the Big Ten and the SEC, slightly different types of offenses. So I'm interested to see, because we know Joe Burrow transitioned exceptionally. But I'm wondering how. I'm not going to compare him to Joe Burrow, but at the same time, the scenario is the same, where how is he going to transition to that more wide-open offense? That's something that I want to see happen. And I want to see and I hope that our preview, we dive into that a little bit.
Yep. And moving on, we've got the Oregon Ducks. They finished in at number 4 on my rankings with 9-3, and really only 3 impact players I found. Bo Nix is at quarterback, Bucky Irving's at running back, and Brandon Dorius is at edge rusher at defensive end. But this is an Oregon Ducks team that lost a lot of offensive linemen in the 2023 NFL draft. I still think they can win 9 games, but I don't think they're going to go 11-2 or 10-3 like some experts think. I think they could hand USC their only loss of the year with a home game against the Trojans late in the season, but Oregon just doesn't really stand out to me. I know they're projected to finish 4th in the Pac-12 behind Utah, but they don't really stand out to me as much as the 3 other teams I told you about earlier in the week, Joey. I mentioned the USC Trojans, the Washington Huskies, and the Oregon State Beavers as a potential dark horse to make the Pac-12 championship game. And Oregon doesn't stand out the way those three teams stand out. So for me, the Oregon Ducks are number 4, and it's a pretty open and shut case. But I want your 2 cents on this before we get to those other 3 teams.
Yeah, when it comes to Oregon, I really like Oregon. I think they are the most complete team, maybe in the entire Pac-12. They've got good offensive play. I really like their offensive line. And even with the players they lost through the draft, I think they lost 2 or 3.
They lost. I
They
feel like
still
they
have
lost
a
3 or 4, but I'm looking it up right now. Oregon.
4?
Yeah, they
Okay,
lost 4.
yeah,
They have 1 returning starter in Marcus Harper II at center. Everybody else is a first-year starter.
Okay, but I still really like those guys.
I mean, a lot of those guys that are
like
first-year starters are juniors or seniors. I think they have a sophomore at left tackle taking over, but that's it. That's really the only
they're
inexperienced player.
They're experienced. They got, but their scheme itself is ideal for first-year starters.
Yep.
Because they set up a little bit wider. They've got more room to work with. They got better line of sight. There's back at about as far as the rules will let linemen be back, so they can see the field. Their tackles are always in a 2-point stance. So their offensive line. I've always liked their offensive line. I'll probably always like their offensive line as long as they stay in the scheme because it is ideal. You can have stars there. You can have role players there. They're all going to perform really well. So I really like that offensive line, and a lot of it is because of the scheme. I like their defensive line. I think they're going to be stout again this year. And I really like their defensive backfield. I like their shell. I like those 4 guys in the back. I guess it'd be 5 guys at this point with the NFL the way it is.
Yeah.
Or the NCAA, well, football in general the way it is. You know, where you usually have those 5 defensive backs. And I really like those guys. I think their offense is, I think the quarterbacking position, I think their quarterback is good. I think he's got a lot more to prove.
I like Bo Nix, but I don't think
every
he's in the
opportunity to
same
do it.
tier as Michael Penix Jr., Caleb Williams, or even DJ Ugalele, who transferred from Clemson to Oregon State. So, you know.
No, but at the same time, I was a Bo Nix fan when he was at Auburn.
I think Bo Nix actually defeated Justin Herbert in his first career start. That's a crazy stat looking back on it now. But, like,
looking back on it, that makes you shake your head a little bit. But I like Bo Nix at Auburn. I never really felt like he fit there, though.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking, hey, he's got a lot to prove. Maybe this is where he fits. This is his time to shine. I think he has all the physical tools. Whether he finds his place,
Bo Nix had a really good junior season at Oregon. 3,593 passing yards, 29 passing touchdowns, and only 7 interceptions. This was the Bo Nix you were expecting to see at Auburn. You end up getting that once he leaves Auburn and goes to Oregon and embraces that change of scenery.
Yeah, but we all know it takes 2 years usually to get a new quarterback fully integrated. Especially in a long-term program like this where they know the offense, they know what it's going to be, they know how it's going to be there. I expect Bo Nix to blow the roof off. But there's a chance he doesn't. And there's a chance he's not that comfortable in the offense to blow the roof off. We know he's more comfortable than he was at Auburn. But how much more comfortable? That's my question. Because we saw, I'm not even going to say we saw the Bo Nix I expected at Auburn last year because I expected better than that at Auburn, and he let me down.
Yeah, Bucky
maybe this is my
Irving
high
had
expectation
1,000
for
rushing
Bo Nix.
yards for the Oregon Ducks after they
Yeah.
lost their running back to USC in the transfer portal. So Bucky Irving
Yeah.
showed he could step up too. So, you know,
Yeah, and I'm gonna say this my expectations may be the fact that I really like Bo Nix. I like him as a prospect, I like him as a player, and maybe my expectations are a bit too high.
no,
I'd rather my
because I think the
expectations be a bit too
Pac-12 this
high
year is like
rather than
the
a bit too
SEC
low.
last year at quarterback. The SEC was loaded at quarterback last year in both the East and West conferences. That's what the Pac-12 is this year.
And that's good because I think if the Pac-12 needs to go out,
There's as
Weird
many
as
as
it sounds,
9
Chris.
potential NFL quarterbacks. On the 12 Pac-12 teams, there's as many as 9 quarterbacks. So,
Chris, I'm going to say something that may sound really weird to a lot of our audience, maybe not you, but if the Pac-12 is going to go out, I think the Pac-12, I think Bo Nix needs to lead that charge. Because Bo Nix he's the one that's experienced. He's the one that's played in the big games. He's the one that say, you know what, if this is our swan song, we're going out on top. We're going out as one of the best conferences in the country. And I'm going out as the best quarterback. I think Bo Nix has to be that guy. If the Big 12 is going to go out the way it needs to, because he's the one with the experience as a huge program guy in big situations. And just huge situations, one after another. I think Bo Nix has to be the poster boy of the Pac-12 this year. I mean, does that sound nuts?
No, it doesn't. But I think I'm having a tough time deciding who's going to play USC in the Pac-12 title. And it's not that I've dismissed Oregon. It's just Washington Huskies have an NFL prospect everywhere at defense this year. And the Oregon State Beavers have a really good strength of schedule. Oregon State gets Utah and Washington at home. And Oregon State, if they beat Oregon in the Civil War to end the year, I know it's no longer called the Civil War, but if I'm still going to call it that. If they win that game,
it's still the Civil War.
Yeah, if Oregon State wins the Civil War after Oregon blew a 31-14 lead to Oregon State last year in that 38-34 Oregon State Beavers victory over the Oregon Ducks, then Oregon State could conceivably go 12-0. I mean, the toughest road games Oregon has are against Washington State, Arizona, Colorado, and Oregon to end the year. I mean, it's not. I think Oregon State's floor is 8-4, but their ceiling is 12-0 due to the strength of schedule. So,
well, here's the thing. I think Arizona State, or Oregon State, sorry, could lose to Colorado because Deion Sanders proved he's a hell of a coach. So if I have a feeling Colorado's going to do better than some of these other people expect, but at the same time, I'm going to give you a nugget. Just nibble on a little bit. If Bo Nix turns into the player I think he can be, and that I expect him to be, you might have your answer right now for who plays UCLA in that championship game.
I don't think Oregon's sniffing the Pac-12 title, Joey. With Oregon State, you've got DJ Ugalele, Damian Martinez, Anthony Gold at wide receiver. Damian Martinez had 982 rushing yards as a freshman with 7 rushing touchdowns. He's going to exceed 1,500 yards with Ugalele at quarterback this year. Anthony Gold's a pretty good receiver, and then Joshua Gray, Jake Levengood at center, and Fuaga at right tackle. Oregon State's got a pretty good offensive line with 3 returning starters. I like the Beavers on offense, and if their defense plays
with you in principle on that,
if the Beavers' defense plays as good as they did a season ago.
Yeah, but if you're having trouble with it, if Bo Nix becomes that difference maker that I expect him to be, and I'll be disappointed if he isn't.
Because Oregon led
Maybe looking at the
31-14
upset.
at halftime against Oregon State. Oregon State outscored Oregon 24-3 in the second half to win that game 38-34.
I'm not going to dismiss that because Oregon State is an amazing team, especially offensively. They always have been. That's their big thing. They can rack up points as quickly as any team in the country. So I'm not going to, poo-poo that.
I'm not saying Oregon can't make the Pac-12 championship. I just think they're a tier below USC, Washington, and Oregon, with all due respect. They're the clear-cut fourth best team.
And they may be. They may be. I think that is a good thing because what we're showing right now with this discussion is that there's top 3 or 4 teams in the Pac-12. If the Pac-12 is going to go out, it's going to go out with a bang. Because those top 4 teams are damn good.
And I do think a Pac-12 team can get in the playoff with one loss. I think if Washington loses to USC but beats them in the Pac-12 title, I think that would be good enough to make the playoff if USC is still undefeated at that point. If USC if USC loses to Oregon but makes the Pac-12 title and they have to play an undefeated Oregon State and they beat that game, that's going to strengthen their resume over a one-loss Ohio State or one-loss Michigan team in the loser of the game. That's going to strengthen their case. And we're going to see a Pac-12 team get in. And if Oregon State does the unthinkable and goes 13-0, they would be the 3 seed in the playoff. They would probably get the Ohio State-Michigan winner. And Alabama we're probably looking at a scenario where either one-loss Alabama, because if Georgia and Alabama are undefeated, the loser of that game would get a rematch with Georgia in the playoff, or you'd probably have to put another team in. Maybe you put in the loser of Michigan, Ohio State to offset 2 SEC teams playing each other in the playoff. I'm not exactly sure how that would play out.
And here is what I was going to say is that it is not inconceivable that if a Pac-12 team goes 13-0, that team's definitely going to get in. But it's not inconceivable if one runs that you may see a Pac-12 team. So I think any of the top 4 teams have a chance to make the playoffs this year. I think there's also a chance that if a team comes out of the Pac at 12-1 or 13-0, there's a very real possibility you have a Pac-12 team playing for the national championship this year.
Yeah. I could definitely see any of these Pac-12 teams beating Ohio State. If Ohio State, because right now in the football index, FPI football poll index, right now Ohio State edges out Alabama as the number 1 team in ESPN's FPI football poll index. So if there's a scenario where Ohio State wins the Big Ten at 13-0 and they draw the Pac-12 champion, I actually think the Pac-12 champion would beat Ohio State in that scenario, Joey. I do. And that's my biggest fear as a Buckeye fan, is that the Pac-12 champion would knock out Ohio State in that scenario. I think Michigan or Penn State would be tougher to beat because those teams have consistency at running back, quarterback, offensive line. But if it's the Pac-12 champion versus Ohio State in the playoff, I would probably pick the Pac-12 champion to win, regardless of who came out of that conference. Because Ohio State doesn't have Stroud. And Kyle McCord's going to lay an egg at some point in the season. As good as he is, I just think he's going to lay an egg at some point. He's going to have a really bad game at some point in the season. We'll see. But I just can't decide between Washington and Oregon State. I cannot decide between Washington and Oregon State for the number 2 spot in my rankings because Washington has a defensive prospect at every position. Braylon Trice at right end, Zion Tupola Fatui at left end, Fatea Tuolede at D tackle, Tuli Letu Gasenoa at defensive tackle, Raylan Goforth at middle linebacker, Edu Ufan Ulofotio at left outside linebacker, Jabbar Muhammad at corner, Elijah Jackson at corner, Michelle Powell at nickel corner, Asa Turner at strong safety, Dominique Hampton at free safety. That's just the defense. And with Washington's offense, they've got Fatanu and Rosengarten at offensive tackle for Penix. Romo Dunes is back. Jalen McMillan's a good number 2 receiver, and Devin Culp's a solid tight end. So Washington feels like a team on paper that's the most complete team. But at the same time, they could go into Oregon State's brand new stadium, lose that game, setting up a USC Oregon State Pac-12 title. I honestly think the winner of that game is going to play USC for the Pac-12, but I cannot decide between Washington and Oregon State. I can't. It's a coin flip game. I mean, last year, Washington barely beat Oregon State 24-21. But Oregon State lost their top 2 corners to the NFL draft. Washington State has their top receivers coming. All 3 of their top 3 wide receivers are back. Their tight end is back. Their offensive tackles are back. Penix is back. And Washington has 11 quality starters on defense. When's the last time the Washington Huskies had that many starters on defense? Maybe 2017 or 2018 when they won the Pac-12, but didn't make the college football playoffs. So, I think it's an interesting scenario to be in. I'm going to flip a coin to decide. I'm getting a lucky silver dollar and I flip a coin right now to decide who makes the Pac-12 title against USC, because it's literally a coin flip, Joey. If it lands on heads, the Washington Huskies are going to the Pac-12 title, folks, on Restream. And if it lands on tails, the Oregon State Beavers will play the USC Trojans. Here we go. It is heads. The Washington Huskies are going to the Pac-12 title. So the first time in the history of the podcast, I've actually flipped a coin to break a tiebreaker. That's how close it is between Washington and Oregon State. You can understand why I'm in this precarious position, Joey.
I really think that it's close between all of the last 3 teams we talked about, including Oregon State, Washington, and Oregon. I think it's going to be a tight race. I think any one of those 3 teams, it may just take one play. It just may be one of those years where, you got ties all the way down the schedule, and that one play, whether it be a sack, an interception, a long touchdown, whatever, may be the thing that decides between those 3 teams which one goes to the championship. And that's, in my opinion, that's really cool for the Pac-12, because I haven't seen a Pac-12 where they've had that situation in a really long time. And, it may be, an Oregon State receiver that catches a pass and just shoots somebody out of their ass and gallops to the end zone or whatever to get that final touchdown, or Bo Nix heaving up some stupid ass freaking pass, catch it, go, or, a sack in the last second, when, the Oregon State quarterback's going back, that last sack that just ends it, or pressure or something like that, or a pressure that causes that last interception. I think this is great for these teams in the Pac-12, especially the ones that don't have a conference yet. Because other conferences, the Pac-12 is actually on the rise when they dissolve. We need to get these teams. So these top 4 teams, UCLA included, may be doing just as much good for the teams below them as anything.
Yep.
But at the same time, we have to look at, as you said, you flipped a coin. there's a chance we could have flipped a coin on all three of those other teams to see who plays.
Yeah, we could have done a coin flip between USC and Oregon. I mean, that's the thing. Could have done a coin flip for USC Oregon and then flip the coin a third time to crown the Pac-12 champion. But I've got USC. I think USC Trojans are the best team in the conference. Caleb Williams is back at quarterback. Marshawn Lloyd comes to USC through the transfer portal. Austin Jones is their best running back returning to the roster. Mario Williams and Brendan Rice and Taj Washington are all back. Dorian Zinger was the number one receiver on Arizona. He's replacing Jordan Addison. So there's not going to be that drop-off at wide receiver this year. Deuce Robinson's a 5-star recruit at tight end. So not only does Caleb Williams have Caleb Williams had 6 quality receivers last year. He's got 4 this year. Plus, he's got a 5-star tight end in Deuce Robinson. I think USC's passing game is going to be just as lethal as it was a season ago. And then you've got Eric Gentry at middle linebacker and Kalen Bullock at strong safety, but no other impact players on the defense outside of those two.
I personally think the 2 highest scoring teams, if we're just going on highest scoring teams, are going to be Oregon and USC. I think those 2 teams are going to put up a lot of freaking points. And I think the question may be, what defense can put them down? What defense can hold that down? Because we're going to see a lot of points scored in the Pac-12 this year.
Well, it was Michael Penix Jr. who led the Pac-12 with 307 passing yards per game. Caleb Williams had 324.1, and Arizona's quarterback, Jalen DeLora, had 307.1 passing yards per game. So, and Arizona actually led the Pac-12 in scoring with 30.8 points. No, wait. No, USC had 41.4. 41.4 for USC, and then Washington at 39.7 was number 2. So Oregon had 38.8.
Well, that leads me to a question. As a conference, I said I think we're going to see a lot of points put up in the Pac-12 this year. You're sitting there looking at the stats. What do you think that average per game is going to be conference-wide? Average. Just give me a round number.
Because USC and Washington were 1 and 2 in points scored. UCLA was 3rd in points scored with 39.2 with Dorian Thompson-Robinson last year. Obviously, he's gone. Dante Moore enters the picture. I still think Utah could average around 31 to 35 points a game with Moore, but they're not going to average 39.2 like they did with DTR last year with a freshman quarterback. That's just not a realistic expectation to have.
I do want to, you just brought up a good point, and I want to reemphasize why, with DTR, if people want to know how good he was, let's look at what he's doing right now in the preseason. He has thrown 2 incompletions on over 20 passes.
In 2 games. He did well against the Commanders. It's at the tipping point where Damian Parson, a guy I watched film with a few years ago when evaluating Monroe St. Brown, he's already campaigning for DTR to be the backup to Watson. I wholeheartedly agree with that.
It's like I love Josh Dobbs, and I'm sitting here, I'm evaluating DTR really closely because I love Josh Dobbs, and I think he can be a good spot starter. But DTR is coming on. DTR is coming on hard. He's coming on fierce.
Yeah, and Oregon was 4th in the Pac-12. Utah was 5th, and Oregon State was 6th.
That shows you the type of quality. I think that shows you the type of quality of the quarterbacking in the Pac-12 that it's so good. We didn't even realize this guy may have.
This is why I had to do so much research on the Pac-12, Joey, because there were 9 quarterback prospects for the NFL draft in the Pac-12. Of the 12 teams, there were 9. This is how many there were in the SEC last year, by the way. And there's at least 7 teams averaging 30 points a game on offense. 7 teams in the Pac-12 have averaged over 30 points a game. It's literally insane.
And I'm going to throw out a scenario for you. Just for the impact of these quarterbacks, what if Deshaun Watson gets injured, DTR comes in and just blows the roof off? Everybody's going to be saying, Pac-12 quarterbacks. we need to draft us some Pac-12 quarterbacks. Well, guess what? They're running on Pac-12 quarterbacks under. So, I mean, even a slight, when you see somebody like BTR come on,
Williams and
after being
Penix
a
should be
star
first-round
in college,
quarterbacks. I honestly believe that both Penix and Williams have first-round tape, but everybody else, Bo Nix, Cam Ward, these are guys competing for spots either in day 2 or potentially day 1 if they do enough. Ugalele as well. So,
well, I think though that, well, there are 2 definite first rounders. I think there are another 3 or 4 that, if they have great years and then ace the process, could also be first. So, I mean, I don't think all of them will be, but I think they could be.
Yes, that's the thing. That's how much talent there is in the Pac-12. I see at least 2 Pro Bowl quarterbacks, 5 potential NFL starters if they develop correctly, and 4 more quarterbacks that are either backups or third stringers on NFL rosters down the road.
But at the same time, I almost wish I were black, because at this point, the way we're talking about this, I wish we could have talked about the Pac-12 like this a couple years ago, and they could have sustained it.
Here's the thing. Here's why they didn't sustain it. I wasn't going to bring this up. Here's why the Pac-12 didn't sustain itself as a conference. ESPN offered the Pac-12 $30 million deal, and the Pac-12's like, we want $50 million from the TV rights. And ESPN was like, no. And then Pac-12 pretty much had to settle for a TV deal with Apple TV that's only paying the schools $20 million.
They left money on the table instead of continuing to negotiate with ESPN.
They wanted $50 million.
More than that,
ESPN was only willing to offer up to $30 million. They wanted $50 million, and they got greedy. And that led to the death of their conference, because now,
at the same time, if they would have negotiated and got like 35, ESPN, huge company, they're going to negotiate to get as much content as they can. They would have showed out 35, 36 million for this. They basically just, by not negotiating and taking a deal with Apple, they basically just put the death nail in their own conference.
Exactly. Pretty much.
So, yeah, I have no sympathy for the Pac-12 in that regard.
I have sympathy for the players and athletes that are going to have to travel now more frequently, but I do not have any sympathy for the athletic directors or the people in charge of the cable bill or the Pac-12 commissioner. I don't have any sympathy for those individuals, but I do have sympathy for the coaches and players.
They screwed the pooch, because the Pac-12 has always been incredibly entertaining, but they've always been up and down as far as talent goes. And right now, they're probably at the highest their talent level has been at. We're talking about 4 potential teams that could potentially make the college football championship. 3 that could potentially be in the college football championship game.
Yeah.
And they screwed up so bad, their conference isn't going to exist next year. They are at the peak of their power, and at their peak, they're going to go. They're going to go away. How bad do you have to screw up to be in that situation?
Yeah, and the SEC's, I think the SEC's in their final year of their TV deal with CBS, and they're going to also enter the first year of their TV deal with the Big Ten this year, and then next year, SEC will be full-time on ESPN, and it will also be full-time on CBS. So you'll see Brad Nessler and Gary Danielson calling Big Ten games going forward. So,
well, that's a really good broadcasting team. So I'm not going to be upset about that.
And you're going to see USC, UCLA, Oregon, Washington in those games now. So CBS is going to continue to reap the benefits of the Big Ten moving forward. And you got Peacock airing some games, as well as Big Noon Kickoff on Fox. So I think it's
So,
really
I think
going to be
it's been like
interesting.
$100 million deal or something like that. So, I mean, that's stuff.
Yeah. So, um, I've got USC beating Washington to win the Pac-12, but I think it's really close. I think there's as many as 3 teams, Oregon State, 4 if you want to include Oregon, but I'm going to go with USC over Washington to win the Pac-12. And I've got the USC Trojans as my 4 seed in the college football playoff. Make sure to like and subscribe to our YouTube channel or any other awesome content. But yeah, I'm going USC over Washington. What's your prediction for the Pac-12? And then we will pivot into the NFL season previews. I know it's really tough to decide. I had to flip a freaking silver dollar. That's how close this thing is. And you know it's hard when I get coins involved.
This may be the toughest conference we cover as far as the top 4 teams go, because any one of them can get hot at any point in time and finish with 1 loss or no losses. Well, we may get 2 teams that finish with only 1 loss.
This is the conference with the most parity, so I think we're in agreement. This has definitely been the most fun conference to preview. I don't think we're going to have this much fun previewing the Big Ten next week or even the SEC in 2 weeks from now.
Absolutely. I think we'll probably lose. I know I'll probably lose interest in the Big Ten simply because we know who's going to be there. We know who's on top, whatever. It's the same every year, same 2-3 teams. But with the Pac-12, you got 4 teams, all conceivably could be the top team in the conference. All relatively exciting. And even the teams in the middle and at the end, it's like, well, we're projected 5 wins. Well, they can end up with 7 or 8. So, I mean, there's a lot going on in the conference this year.
Yeah, and it's just interesting. I mean, one more team to keep an eye on if they go undefeated is the Tulane Green Wave. Let's say for hypothetical purposes, Ole Miss made the SEC title game, but Tulane is a head-to-head win over them and they go undefeated. At that point, Tulane would be probably the second group of 5 team along with Cincinnati to make the playoff. Now, I'm not predicting Tulane to do this, but I'm just throwing a hypothetical out there because hypothetically, the schedule does favor Tulane if they can get by Ole Miss in Oxford, Mississippi. They are a team that could potentially go 12-0 as a group of 5 team this season. And they lost some linebackers and Spears at running back, but they've got Michael Pratt back at quarterback. So, and the AAC is just much weaker now, mainly due to Cincinnati, Houston, and Central Florida moving to the Big 12. So, we'll see what happens.
Well, Tulane, I know you mentioned them a few times. I know you mentioned them when we talked off podcast. You have a lot of admiration for them this year. You got a lot of high hopes for them. And I'll admit it, Tulane has a really good offense, and they've always been great with their fundamentals. Their fundamentals as a team have always been sound. They're always in the right place at the right time. They're never overly athletic, but they're just athletic enough. And they always give themselves a chance to win. So I think they got a little more star power this year, which is credence to your belief, because if they've always been really good because they're really solid, now add that being really solid to a couple of star players. And last time that happened, Tulane finished, I think, in the top 6 or 7.
Yeah, they did beat USC in the Cotton Bowl last year, so an incredible game. It was probably the best bowl game of the non-playoff games.
Yeah. The best Tulane team I can remember maybe 12 years ago, 13 years ago, Because I remember I went out of my way to watch their bowl game. I think they only had 8 wins that year, but they had a brutal schedule. And they played in a New Year's Eve. I think it was New Year's Eve or New Year's Day game or something like that. And there was like 4 feet of snow outside. And it was still snowing. I remember it pretty vividly. I was playing NFL head coach, and I shut it off to watch that game specifically.
I loved NFL head coach. Are you talking about the 06 version with Bill Cowher or the 09 version with Tony Dungy?
Yeah.
Just curious.
I forget. I think it was the 06. But it was a great game, and I played it constantly.
Same
but
here.
I shut it off for that game. Tulane had a great game in that with a great team.
I'm guessing it was 06 because I think this was at the time Matt Forte was at Tulane. I could be wrong on that, but if it was,
it may have been.
Yeah.
Yeah, it may have been, but that was the best Tulane team I can remember ever seeing, and I remember going out of my way to make sure that I saw that game.
Yeah.
And I think Tulane has a chance to do that this year, but at the same time, I'm going to be cautiously optimistic about them because they are one of those teams that are always solid, but they never have the stars to push them over the top. If one of those guys breaks out, which there is a possibility of,
there is a possibility Michael Pratt breaks out.
Yeah, so if they break out, then it could be, 12 years ago all over again, Matt Forte all over again, where you have that star that just propels the team. But I think they have an easier schedule this year than they did during Forte's year.
Yeah, and that's due to their conference losing some teams in the Big 12, in my opinion. But I think you've narrowed it down to Oregon and USC, but you're having trouble picking a winner. I would say that's where you are at this point in the process with your Pac-12 evaluation.
Yeah, and but at the same token, not only that, but I think any of those other 3 teams could be in there, not just Oregon. So I think it is a tough call, and I think UCLA could easily beat any of those 3 teams. So it is a tough decision as to who would come out. Let's take a page out of Chris's book here and find something to throw.
I love it. You're doing a coin flip as well.
No, I don't have any coins. I just find random things and I'll throw them at people.
You're gonna throw a beer cap? You're gonna flip a beer cap in the air? I'm joking.
No. It's I don't do bottles.
Yeah, you don't throw bottles. We don't want anybody vandalizing any property at their homes.
I got holes in the wall. Smacks one of my neighbors in the head. I threw a bottle through the wall. I was like, sorry, I was just seeing if Oregon's going to win. That would not go over well.
No.
Okay. I got some super soft stuff here. Skin protector. We're going to go with the lucky logo is UCLA. The group facts are Oregon.
So, when you say UCLA, are you referring to USC, but you have the 2 teams mixed up, or do you think Yeah, okay. All right.
Yeah, I was too busy trying to find something. I'm sorry.
No problem.
I was cleaning this morning.
No problem.
And we landed on drug facts. Chris, tell me who has won.
I I'm not sure.
Chris, were you not paying attention?
You said heads was I think USC won. I don't know.
Damn it, now I gotta do it again.
Okay.
Okay. Let's go. Drug Factor, Oregon. Lucky is USC.
Okay.
God damn it. It landed upright.
Maybe that's a sign that
Okay,
you should
it's
pick
landed
another
on Lucky.
Pac-12 team. Maybe that's a sign from God that you should pick another Pac-12 team.
Yeah, it literally landed straight up, and I'm like, I did not pick the cap, and it landed anywhere.
Yeah, if it
Okay,
does that
the
again,
reason
you
landed
switch
on
the
Lucky.
teams just for the hell of it.
All right. Whatever deity you believe in wins. The cap has spoken.
Yeah, I've got USC over Washington. You've got Oregon and USC in the title game. I'll take this dime here. Heads, it is Oregon. Tails, it is USC. I'll flip the dime here.
Be better than skincare product. That didn't work out too well for me.
And it landed on heads. So I said heads, USC, tails, Oregon. It landed on heads. So I guess the Trojans are your Pac-12 champion. So
that works. You know.
Okay.
It had to be better luck than skincare products, because skincare products just didn't like me when it came to football.
I guess not. Maybe the skincare products were pissed that you denied Washington and Oregon State a championship, Pac-12 championship appearance. And next week we'll preview the Big Ten. Nicholas Singleton, Penn State, J.J. McCarthy, Michigan, and Marvin Harrison Jr., Ohio State. But on that note, we are going to pivot to the NFL. And I actually haven't tested this out yet, but I'm gonna load the screen share and see if this works here. Yep. So yeah. So this is perfect. I've got the screen share loading, and people can see my predictions on playoff predictors. People can actually see my predictions on playoff predictors. So last week we previewed the AFC North and the NFC North, and right here you can see I have the Bengals 12-5, Browns 10-7, Ravens and Steelers at 9-8. I have the Lions and Packers at 9-8 with the Lions winning the division, and I have the Vikings and Bears both going 7-10. So we previewed those teams last week. You can go on YouTube and watch the videos if you want full in-depth breakdowns. This is my first time actually doing the screen share on Restream. It's pretty cool, by the way. So we'll get into the Houston Texans. They're the team we're going to start out with. I've gone through 8 NFL depth charts for week 1, Joey. The Texans are the only AFC South team I've gone through so far with an in-depth breakdown. But you look at the Texans, I have the Texans going 7-10. I have them losing to Baltimore, beating the Colts in week 2, losing to Jacksonville, losing to Pittsburgh at home, losing to Atlanta in Atlanta, beating New Orleans before the bye week. And I have them winning a few games to get back to 500, losing to the Bengals, beating the Cardinals, losing to Jacksonville again, beating Denver. I actually have the Texans at 6-6 heading into their final 5 games. And in their final 5 games, they play the Jets, the Titans in Tennessee, the Browns in Houston, the Titans in Houston, and the Colts in Indy to end the year. If they can win 3 of those 5 games, 9-8 is on the table. It's unlikely the Texans go 9-8, but it's not out of the realm of possibilities. So that's something to take into consideration.
I don't think the Titans win the division. I think that goes to the Jaguars, which we'll talk about later. But I do think that Tennessee finishes at the bottom. I think Houston has a chance to finish second.
I have the Titans at the bottom of the division as well. I've got the Colts and Texans both at 7-10. I've got the Titans at 6-11. And I've got the Jaguars at 15-2 at the moment. But like, before we get into these breakdowns, I mean, the Texans, they've got Nico Collins as their number 1, Robert Woods is the number 2, and Tank Dell is the slot receiver for Stroud. Tunsil, Kenyon Green, Juice Scruggs, Shaq Mason, and Titus Howard are the starters. Howard did get injured 3 days before the start of the Texans preseason game, and his injury is a 4 to 6 week recovery. So it's possible that Titus Howard misses the first 2 games for the Texans. And that's why I think they might lose the Ravens. But the Ravens are very thin at corner, as we discussed last week. But the Texans...
And that's exactly what I was going to get to. That's what I was going to get to. So I was going to say, I think Stroud could get off to a potentially Rookie of the Year winning start.
I don't think they're
knocking against the Ravens.
Only you and one other employee have the Texans winning. So 9 of our 11 staff members are leaning towards the Ravens to beat the Texans at the moment. But that is unofficial. That is not officially official yet. Here's the crazy thing. The Ravens are 9.5 on the point spread, Joey. Yeah. So Vegas is saying the Ravens are 10 points better than the Texans. I think the Ravens win, but I don't think they win by 10. I don't think they win by 10. I have the Ravens winning by a touchdown, and I have the Texans covering the spread. Because right now, the Ravens are favored by 9.5. 9.5 is the point spread for this game, with the Ravens at minus 9.5. So if you're betting on the Ravens and the point spread, you have to bet on the Ravens to beat the Texans by 10. I don't think they'll beat the Texans by 10. I think this will be a high-scoring shootout where the Ravens prevail 28-21. That's my score for the moment. 28-21 Ravens.
The one thing, the Texans have one thing this year they didn't have last year. That's talent. The big thing going against them, however, is youth. They do not have experience at any major positions over, 3 years.
And right now, Jonathan Greenard is beating out Jerry Hughes for the left end job next to Will Anderson. Jerry Hughes led the team in sacks. And you look at the other positions on defense, the Texans have, they have Sheldon Rankins from the Jets as their new defensive tackle, and he's paired with Malik Collins. And then they have Christian Harris at right outside linebacker, Denzel Perriman at middle linebacker. Those will be the 2 linebackers in a nickel defense. And then they have Blake Cashman at Sam linebacker when they run a 43. And when the Texans don't run the 43, they've got a nickel defense with Stingley, Steven Nelson, and Desmond King. And that's a good nickel trio. And you've got Jimmy Ward at strong safety and Patir at free safety. But the Texans lack depth at corner. If you know who the Texans' number 4 corner is, Joey? Shaquille Griffin from the Jaguars. So if anything happens to Stingley or Nelson or even Desmond King, you're going to see Shaquille Griffin starting. And I think that lack of depth at corner is going to hurt the Texans against teams that are really deep at receiver.
And here's the thing. You kept telling me Shaquille Griffin was the Jaguars' concrete number 2, and I said he sucked after watching him live.
No, he actually began the season as the number 1 corner, with Campbell as the number 2 corner.
He began the season as number 1, but he sucked enough to go down to number 2. And then he only stayed at number 2 because Jags didn't have anybody else. But he sucked all year.
And then when he got injured, the other guys came in and replaced him. So.
Yeah, and then when he came back, he sucked again. So Griffin is past his prime. He is past old age. He is in line to retire. Okay? He is at retirement age. He is at retirement performance. If the Texans are down to him, the Texans are screwed.
Because he's their best backup corner. He's their best backup corner. So if Stingley suffers a season-ending injury like he did in Week 13, Shaquille Griffin's going to play the final 5 games, and you're not going to have Stingley. And at that point, you're in trouble.
Texans are screwed. Because here's how bad Griffin was. the Jags could have been the number 2 team in the AFC last year. Blown coverages by him in games I was at, including one game where he literally blew the game because he couldn't even turn around properly and damn near fell down and gave up a reception for a touchdown. Cost Jags playoff spots.
Higher playoff spots in the 4th seed. But to be
Higher
fair,
playoff spots.
But to be fair, the Titans had like 20 players on the injury reserve list. And I told you around week 11, week 12, Titans have a laundry list of players on IR. They have 20 players on the injured reserve list. I don't think I've seen this many in my life. If the Jaguars can pull their heads out of their asses and it's tied for the division week 18, the Jaguars might come back and win the division. And that's exactly what happened. But the Titans were my preseason pick to win the division, but I've recognized it might be appropriate to pivot to Jacksonville now, and that's what I did, and that's what ended up happening. They ended up winning the division.
Yes, it's a very nice pivot. I will give you credit. Kevin McHale is proud of you.
You had the Jaguars winning all year, so I'll give you credit for that because you earned it. You were like one of the only people that had the Jaguars winning the division this year because I thought they were a year away heading into last season. Now we're at that point and they have got the confidence a year early. So we're going to get to the Jaguars soon, but the Texans, I can't pick the Texans to beat the Ravens because of the fact that Shaquille Griffin's the number 4 corner because Todd Monken might bring out some 4 wide receiver sets. And if he does, the Jaguars are going to have to play Griffin. And if the Jaguars do end up giving Griffin Texans, not the Jaguars, sorry. If the Texans give Shaquem Griffin any snaps against the Ravens, I'm just sending Zay Flowers in a one-on-one against Griffin and just torching Griffin. That's what I'm doing. I'm just like, yeah, this is what we're going to do. We'll put Zay Flowers on Griffin and we'll freaking torch the bastard.
Who are their linebackers so we can potentially put a linebacker in the slot?
Their 2 linebackers are Denzel Perriman and Christian Harris from Alabama. Their 3rd round pick from Alabama. Those are their 2 linebackers.
Can one of them play the slot?
No. They are both pure linebackers, Joey. Neither one's ever lined up at nickel corner.
Okay.
Because if Desmond King...
All right, I'm going to go talk to Pisoni and see if he can try out for the Texans.
If Desmond King... Because right now, that trio of Desmond King, Derek Stingley, and Steven Nelson is good, but there is no depth. If any of those 3 get injured, there is no depth at corner, with Griffin as the top guy on the depth chart.
My buddy Casey's from Texas. I'm sure he'd like to go home for a season. He might be able to take over for Jenkins. I mean, I know he's a bar manager, but still, he has to be better than Jenkins. I'm going to text him and see if he can go try out.
So you think he could be better than Shaquille Griffin, but yeah. It's just bad. It's like, it's woefully bad. I'm not trying to roast the Texans, guys, but the fact that Shaquille Griffin's your number 4 corner, it's genuinely embarrassing.
We're not trying to roast the Texans because we're both on the Texans. We're trying to roast Shaquille Griffin because he freaking sucks.
And if he's your number 4 corner, you have problems at cornerback depth. You do.
Yeah, there's a reason everybody and their grandmother said, hey, Jags, draft a corner.
And teams that have depth at receiver are going to pick apart the Texans. The Ravens have depth at receiver if everybody's healthy. The Jaguars have depth at receiver. The Steelers even have depth at receiver.
Browns.
The Browns have depth at receivers.
Do we even want to get into what the Bengals are going to do to them?
The Falcons is a tough road game for the Texans. The Falcons are just a more experienced team, and they're a good home team. Panthers. I've got the Texans beating the Panthers.
Falcons may be the wild card, though.
I've got the
Texans may be the wild card, though, because the Falcons have a lot of unproven talent. They have a lot of talent, but they have a lot of unproven talent.
That's a pick'em game for me. If this game was in Houston, I'd probably pick the Texans to win. It's in Atlanta, so that's like a pick'em game for me. But the Buccaneers have Evans and Godwin. The Broncos even have talent at receiver. I mean, Sutton and Judy both look good in the preseason. The Jets have a lot of receiver depth. There's just a lot of teams. I think the Texans split with the Titans and Colts, but just looking at their schedule, I think 7-10 is the ceiling. And, I love the Texans safety depth with Jimmy Ward and Patir. Eric Murray, last year's starting safety, is a backup, and then you have MJ Stewart as the other backup safety. I love the Texans safety depth, but come on, the fact that Griffin is your number 4 corner is what's alarming here. I don't think you can recover from that, Houston. That's like you should have drafted a corner in 2023, or if you did draft a corner, give that corner a bigger role. But yeah, I've got the Texans at 7-10 for that reason. Anything you want to add before we get to the Colts here? Because I feel like we've covered the Texans pretty thoroughly. Because there is talent, but they're not going to have their right tackle, Titus Howard, for the first 2 games.
There is talent. I think they're going to be a couple years away, because it's not saying they're a couple years away because of talent, but mainly experience. I don't even think, if I'm not mistaken, I don't think their coach has been a head coach before either.
No, he hasn't.
I think it's going to be some growing pains coming in.
Yeah.
I just think it's going to be some growing pains for the first couple of
I've got the Texans 2-4 heading into the bye week. But if the Texans lose the Ravens and they don't beat the Colts at home in week 2, you're looking at a team that could very well be 0-5 heading into week 6 against the Saints before the bye week, because the Jaguars, Steelers, and Falcons are Houston's opponents in weeks 3 through 5. I'm going to pull up the Colts schedule here. But yeah, the Colts, I think the Colts are an interesting team. I've got the Colts at 7-10. I've got them starting 0-3 with losses to Jacksonville, Houston, and Baltimore. Anthony Richardson's at quarterback. Jonathan Taylor's your running back. Jim Irsay would rather pay I saw the video Urinating Tree did. It was great. Jim Irsay would rather pay a whale than Jonathan Taylor. And then 5-point vids are joking about Free Willy and stuff. I thought that was great. But yeah, the Colts, the Rams, and Titans are both home games for the Colts in weeks 4 through 5. I think those are winnable games. I think the Colts can beat the Saints at home.
Chris, I think you need to realize something. Cleaners did pay a whale to play running back for them, so I mean, it's not out of the realm of possibility.
Who are you talking about? What whale? What 49ers running back? Okay. But yeah, the Colts, they have some winnable home games. They play the Saints. They play the Buccaneers following a bye week. They play the Steelers at home in week 15. They play the Raiders and Texans at home to end the year. They play the Falcons in Atlanta. That is a game the Colts could steal. They could steal the game against Atlanta. They're another one of these teams that has a really easy strength of schedule. They get the Titans in week 13, so if they can steal those games against Atlanta and Tennessee, you're looking at having an outside chance at going 9-8. I think you had the Colts at 9-8. You almost picked them to go 10-7 before losing in week 18 to the Texans. So, I think it's interesting. I have the Colts going 7-2 at home, but 0-8 on the road. So if the Colts can find a way to steal some road games this year, I think 9-8's in play, but I think this is going to be a rebuilding year for the Colts. But I think they could be competitive in 2024 or 2025. I don't think they're that far off.
Yeah, I'm looking at, when it comes to, I really like what the Colts did offensively this year. I like Anthony Richardson. I think they got more speed. I think they're trying to revamp their identity.
And they've got Michael Pittman.
I haven't looked at what their offense, is going going to look like overall. I haven't seen much.
Michael
from their
Pittman
camp.
Jr. and
I saw a
Jonathan
couple things
Taylor,
on
you know
NFL
those are
Live,
the
but-
stars in their offense. And they've got Quentin Nelson, Ryan Kelly, Braden Smith, Bernard Raymond.
Yeah.
I like their offensive line for the most part. So, and then either Will Fry or Danny Penner at right guard. But overall, I like the Colts' offensive line. And I like Taylor
I
and
like
Pittman.
what they did. It's just I haven't heard much out of their camp. They've been really quiet. So, I mean, I'm interested to see their first preseason game because that'll be the first time I've really heard anything about them. So, in a way, I admire them for keeping quiet, that they keep themselves out of the limelight, even with a highly touted quarterback as a rookie. But at the same time, I'm not really pleased with them because I haven't heard anything.
Yeah, and NFL Network is not airing the Colts-Bills game at 1. They're going to be airing the Titans-Bears game instead. But we'll get to the Titans in a little bit. I want to get to the Jaguars.
And let's be honest. I was trying to get the game last night with the Browns and Commanders. And
it was not on NFL Network. They did not re-air the game on NFL Network.
No,
of all the games they aired,
none of the feeds were good.
No, Joey, here's what happened. NFL Network said, we're going to air Packers-Bengals live. Then we're going to air Broncos-Seahawks live. Then we're going to re-air every other preseason game. And after the Steelers game ended, instead of re-airing Commanders-Browns, you know what NFL Network said? We're going to re-air the Packers-Bengals game that we already aired live. Screw the Browns-Commanders. That's pretty much the thought process NFL Network had back in Los Angeles. So,
because I tried.
Because instead of airing a game that was already live on NFL Network, instead of re-airing a game that was already live on NFL Network, I would think you air the one game that you didn't air yet. I would think that would be the direction you go in.
You would think, because they'd be like, oh, we saw the one series with these team starters, saw how how good their depth was. Hey, let's go over see these Commanders with their new ownership, how they reshaped the roster, the Brown starters, which we've heard so much about. Let's see how all this fits together, and then see the depth of these two teams and see how it works. Because we haven't seen them yet.
Yeah, because they aired Falcons-Dolphins. They aired Steelers-Buccaneers at 7 a.m. this morning. They aired Falcons-Dolphins before that. They aired Giants-Lions rerun at like 1 a.m. And after the Broncos-Cardinals game aired. The one game NFL Network skipped was Commanders at Browns. I think the weather inclement may have played a role in that, but they skipped that game and said, instead of re-airing that, NFL Network, I feel like they screwed the pooch here because they had an opportunity to re-air that game, and instead they chose to air the Bengals-Packers game twice.
Yeah.
After already airing that game live. You aired that game live once. You don't need to re-air that game again. Give the Browns, Commanders.
Let's face it. Outside of the Jets and Packers with the Aaron Rodgers thing, what two teams made more postseason or preseason rumblings than the Browns and, Commanders? You would have thought, hey, let's get a look at these two teams here on NFL Network, at least for a re-airing. You would think, maybe you would want to see some stuff that is coming out of camp. But no, we got to see the Packers camp again.
Nope, we got to watch Jordan Love destroy the Bengals again.
3 passes.
We got to watch Jordan Love destroy the Bengals. We got to watch Pickett and the Steelers. Oh, we're not going to. Yeah, so I don't know what to think of NFL Network's decision here. I feel like it was a screw up.
I don't know. Yeah, so do I. It's like, you had a lot of things that you wanted to see, and a lot of it was basically Elijah Moore and how did the Washington new ownership start to construct that roster, and how well is that new roster looking?
NFL Network a rare L here because it's like you're used to seeing every single preseason game re-aired on NFL Network. And I guess they said, we'd rather re-air Packers-Bengals, a game we aired live at 7 p.m. last night, than re-air the Commanders-Browns game. And I don't understand the thought process behind it at all.
That's why I pay them $100 a year. That's why I pay them $100 a year, because I want to rewatch every game at all times. You know, that's on NFL.com, NFL Plus, which is part of NFL Network, which they have paired with this year, which is why the price went up.
And they're pairing Red Zone with NFL Plus as well, which is another reason why the price went up.
Yeah. Yeah, so it's like, dude, you're giving us all this stuff, and then you're saying, ha, fooled you. No, that's not okay. That's not okay. I want to see every game, even if it's condensed. I want to see red zone stuff. I want to be able to replay red zone because I want to see every touchdown. I want to see how it happened. That's something I used to love during the day when we had red zone for free out in Ohio. This is stuff I want to see. Don't screw with me. Don't screw with me, NFL Network. Don't screw with me, NFL.com. Don't screw with me, NFL period. We love to see this stuff.
Yeah, and we're going to pivot to the Jaguars now. We pretty much broke down the Colts. I've got the Jaguars starting the year 8-0 before the bye week. I have the Jaguars losing 2 games to San Francisco following their bye week and to the Browns in Cleveland. I have them finishing the year 15-2. They are my number 1 seed in the AFC, and I have them losing the AFC title game to either Buffalo or Cincinnati. But I have them beating the Chiefs, the Bills in London, the Falcons in London, and the Bengals in Monday Night Football. I have them going 8-1 at home with their only home loss to San Francisco following the bye week.
Yeah, I know you don't like football satire, but there's one of the people that I watch.
I don't like football satire because I'm a content creator.
I know you don't. But just humor me. And they were talking about the games in London. The Jags walked in. The Jags player walked in, speaking British as he was talking, and everybody's like, this is really weird. And everybody's like, oh, he's already been here for 2 weeks for the second game in London. And it was really funny because it's like you take somebody from Jacksonville, because you've been here, you know how people talk here, turn them British. And then say, this is what happens when you mix a Floridian and a British person and leave them in London for 2 weeks. And then you have everybody else saying, oh, God, no. I don't know if this is the NFL's way to be funny or if they truly think that if the Jags, big team this year, if they don't want them to get off to a great start, because you know the Jags as well as I do, they play really well in London.
If the Jaguars were playing the Bills in Buffalo, I would be picking. If the Jaguars were playing the Bills in Buffalo, I'd be picking the Bills to win. But they're playing the Bills in London, and they're playing the Bills in London coming off a game in London. So the Jaguars will have that extra week where they're already acclimated to London, whereas the Bills, they'll be adjusting to London. So advantage Jaguars.
That's kind of where the satire was. And that's kind of where the satire was going, is that the Bills would be at a disadvantage because the Jaguars were so used to London that they were speaking in a British accent because they had 2 weeks over there. And that's kind of where the satire was going. It was just going to a bit of an extreme. And that's where people worry, is because I don't know if it's Wembley Stadium or what it is, but the Jags just do well in that stadium.
Yeah, and the week before the Jaguars play the Bills in London, they play the Falcons in London, and Calvin Ridley's return against the Falcons.
Yeah, and I almost feel bad about that because I really like Calvin Ridley. And in your breakout season, what do you have to do? Oh, yeah. Go against a team that's potentially going to be number one in the conference in a place that they're traditionally amazing at.
I don't think the Falcons are going to be a number one team in their division. I think they've got the third best quarterback in their division.
Not the Falcons, the Jaguars.
The Jaguars are going to be really good. I think they are going to be the top AFC team. I know it's a little bit bold. It's a little bit out there, but you've got Ingram, you've got Ridley and Kirk. ETN and Tank Bigsby are splitting 50% of the carries. Bigsby broke a 70-yard run for a touchdown in practice last week. Scott Hansen was breaking down the new bathroom stalls at the new Jaguars practice facility. Yeah, Scott Hansen was in Jacksonville this week, breaking down the.
And I've heard a lot of great things about Tank Bigsby and what he's been able to do. I've also heard that left tackle position, it has been a battle.
Yeah, it's been because right now Walker Little's ahead of Anton Harrison on the depth chart at left tackle. Harrison's still the right tackle, but Walker Little is still the left tackle in the Jaguars depth chart. But I'm not putting too much stock into that because I still think Harrison could win that job. But it feels like it could go either way.
I think Harrison could win it too. I do think Harrison can win. I agree with you. But those two guys are battling for it. It's like everybody thinks this is my chance and I'm not giving it up. And these guys are fighting for it. And they both performed well. The thing is, who's going to come out on top? Because I don't think there's going to be any losers as far as the players themselves that come up on top. Because I think they're pushing themselves so hard, they're all going to come out of this better for it.
Yeah, the Jaguars have every returning starter back on defense. The one player they lost to free agency was, I think it was Arden Key, who was a backup. And they've got everybody else coming back. So I think the Jaguars are going to be in a great position to potentially do something special. So, yeah, I've got the Jaguars as my 1 seed. They have a 467 SOV and a 495 strength of schedule. So, I think they are one of the huge beneficiaries this year because of the strength of schedule. Because they get the NFC South this year, and they get the NFC South. Their only opponent is the 49ers, and they also get the Jaguars also get that's weird. The Jaguars also get the AFC North. But the Jaguars get Pittsburgh and Cleveland on the road. They get Cincinnati and Baltimore at home, which is very advantageous.
That's going to be tough.
Not going to be easy to win either of those games.
It's advantageous that they get Cincinnati and Baltimore at home because those are two really good teams, but it doesn't bode well for them to have to go on the road in Cleveland and Pittsburgh because you and I both know those two fan groups are not exactly the most accommodating visiting fans.
Yeah.
And it's going to be hostile there. So I think win or lose, the Jags are going to come out of those two games better for it. But at the same time, those are going to be tough games. Because
I have the Jaguars winning against Pittsburgh but losing to Cleveland. They're going to lose to one of those two teams. They're going to lose to one of those two AFC North teams on the road.
Yeah, it just depends on which one it is because those are going to be two really tough games for them to come into.
Yeah. And I do have an update on the Jags stadium renovation. It's going to be a $2 billion. It's $1.4 billion for the stadium renovations, but when you add the other renovations to the stadium, that adds up to $2 billion. And I think the Cons want the city of Jacksonville to pay $1 billion, and he'll pay the other $1 billion, and then they'll build the stadium. That's pretty much what I've heard with the renovations.
And unlike a lot of owners, the Cons actually care about Jacksonville. They actually care about the city. They've been trying to improve the city for years, and the city council has just poo-pooed, just brushed their hands of it. Like, No worries, guys. We got this. No, you don't have it. If you had it, Jackson will be in a much better place. Listen to people that know what the fuck they're doing, but they won't do it. So the Collins are trying. Collins are trying. Tony's trying. Shot's trying. They're trying. But the city ain't budging. So I'm hoping that it ends up being a 2-year deal, that it costs $2 billion, and that everything gets back to normal soon.
Yeah, but then the Jaguars would have to play in Gainesville or Orlando for 2 years. The Jaguars would have to play in Gainesville or Orlando for 2 years during the stadium renovations in 2026 and 2027 after Lawrence's rookie deal is up.
I just hope we got a new mayor. I just hope she is more dedicated to improving the city than...
And if the Jaguars win the Super Bowl during the renovation, if the Jaguars' only Super Bowl win comes during the stadium renovation, they're going to have to wait 2 years to hang up the Super Bowl banner. Like, if the Jaguars win it in 2026 when they're playing in Orlando, the Jaguars are going to have to wait until the new stadium's done with the renovation in order to hang their Super Bowl banner. It's going to suck.
That'd be a damn shame.
I mean, they could put the Super Bowl banner up in Orlando, but it wouldn't make sense.
Yeah, unless they said we're going to do a 2-year renovation, and they're like, oh crap,
or they could do a 4-year renovation where they only renovate during the off season and stay in Jacksonville. But I think that's more costly. I would just do the 2-year renovation in another stadium, just get it out of the way.
What I would say is, I'm looking at the rate that these builders in Jacksonville put shit up. Those guys put things up at a remarkable rate. Because I've been sitting there, I will watch them put things up and them work. They are very meticulous at their craft, but they are fast. They have some great building companies in Jacksonville. If you're a builder, if you're a construction worker, come to Jacksonville, because these guys are some of the best I've ever seen.
Yeah. And now we're going to preview the final AFC South team. I do think the Jaguars would win a playoff game, but if they draw the Bengals, Bills, or even the okay, maybe not the Chargers. I don't think the Chargers would get that far unless they got by the Chiefs. And if the Chargers, we're going to save that conversation 2 weeks from now, because 2 weeks from now we'll be previewing the AFC West. But yeah, the Jaguars are my number 1 seed at 15-2. I think Joey has them at 14-3, but they're his number 1 seed in the AFC as well. The final team we're going to break down in the AFC South is the Tennessee Titans, and then we'll get to the NFC South division. The Titans, I have them going 6-11, and this is a team I have them starting the year 0-5. I have the Titans getting their first win of the season against the Ravens in London before the bye week. That's when I have the Titans getting their first win. And if they lose that game, you're looking at the Titans being 0-6 heading into the bye week. And then they would probably pivot from Ryan Pail to Will Levis at that point.
I'm going to be as diplomatic with the Titans as I can.
I have the Titans at 6-11, and this is assuming Ryan Tannehill starts all 17 games. That's assuming Tannehill starts all 17 games. I don't think
I love their coaching staff. That's the big thing. I love their coaching staff. I think their coaching staff is one of the best in the AFC. But the thing is, let's face it, they've got young players that will be good in 2 to 3 years. Right now, their entire team is Derrick Henry. Derrick Henry is their team. If Derrick Henry goes down, they are screwed. Okay? That's basically it. They may be really good in 2 to 3 years. But right now, they are Derrick Henry.
Basically, what Joey's trying to say is the Tennessee Titans, if the Tennessee Titans were NFL running backs were monster trucks, Derrick Henry would be Gravedigger. There's no point in paying to go see monster trucks live unless Gravedigger is there. And let's face it, Derrick Henry's the Gravedigger of running backs. That's a compliment to how good Henry is as a running back. It's like, yeah. But most monster truck enthusiasts will tell you Gravedigger is the most marketable monster truck in the business. So, yeah. But, I think the Titans can beat Atlanta following the bye week because the Titans get 2 weeks to prepare for Atlanta. They go to Pittsburgh on Thursday night. They'll lose there. They'll lose to the Buccaneers in Tampa Bay in Week 10, and then they'll lose to Jacksonville. They play Carolina at home. If Tannehill is starting, that's a win. If Levis or Willis is starting, that's a loss. They play the Colts at home. Same thing applies. They play the Dolphins on Monday Night Football. They will lose there. They play Seattle and Tennessee at home. I think they win those 2 games, but they lose to Houston and Jacksonville to end the year at 6-11. And despite being 6-11, the Titans are my number 15 AFC team. They are my second worst AFC team at 6-11. What does that tell you, Joey? That my second worst AFC team is 6-11.
It tells you that the AFC is damn good. It also tells me that Derrick Henry is damn good because he's going to be carrying that shit for the entire season. Yeah. So it tells me those 2 things.
I mean, the Titans open up against New Orleans, another team we're going to preview in a few minutes here, and then they play the Chargers at home. They get the Browns in Week 3, and then they get the Bengals at home. That's a tough 4-game stretch. I could see them losing all 4 of those games, and then they get the Colts on the road in Week 5.
As a fan, I really want to see both Henry and Nick Chubb go for like 125 yards each. Just as a fan, I want to see those guys just run roughshod across the football field because it may be the only chance we get to see it for years.
I mean, now, the only 2 running backs that have a shot at Canton are Derrick Henry and Nick Chubb, and that's if they both dominate for 2 to 5 more seasons. Yeah. I don't see anybody else at running back getting into Canton.
Yeah, and when are we going to get this opportunity to see this again? I mean, they don't meet again for another 4 years. I mean, I want to see them both run wild. I want to see them have the games of their lives against each other because we may not see it again. We may not see them together again until then, which is a sad, sad thought, but at the same time, it is a very realistic thought.
Yeah.
So, I really want to see those.
And DeAndre Hopkins and Traylon Burks a good receiver tandem for the short term, but if Ryan Tannehill's not throwing those 2 the ball, I think they're in trouble because I don't trust Levis or Willis enough.
I love Hopkins. I think he is still a top-notch receiver, but he has, in the last 2 years, subtly started showing his age. Last year, 2 years ago, he slowed down a little bit. Last year, he got injured in Week 9. Yes, everybody says Maurice Jones-Drew would be a very good number 2 receiver on most NFL teams.
Traylon Burks, you mean, yeah.
Well, guess what? No, I'm saying Donovan Peoples-Jones because this is the stats that I'm comparing.
Donovan Peoples-Jones did not
his.
Let me double check.
Hopkins matched his statistical output for the season in 9 games. Hopkins was on pace for almost 1,800 yards last year. If he would have continued on that pace, he is better than 90% of the number 2 receivers in the NFL. But is he going to play 9 games? Because he outperforms number 2 receivers in half the season. But if he plays every game. Because remember, he had subpar quarterbacking last year. He plays every game at this age. I'm just wondering, this is just a wonder, this is just a hint, this is just a thought process. Could he potentially, Chris, I'm going to put this to you, could he potentially hit, if he's healthy all 17 games, 2,000 yards?
I don't think there's a receiver in the NFL that can hit 2,000 receiving yards. Tyreek Hill's going to try to do it. But yeah.
But if he plays at the level he did before he was injured last year,
I think he can exceed. Damn high level. I think he could go anywhere between 1,000 and 1,500 realistically. I think if both Hopkins and Burks play 17 games, I think Hopkins can reach 1,500. I think Burks can reach 1,000. So, and that's with Ryan Tannehill at quarterback and Derrick Henry at running back. That's with Tannehill playing every game. With coffee and mayonnaise boy Will Levis or Malik Willis starting, I'm not sure either receiver can reach 1,000 if those two are starting.
Yeah, because I mean, Hopkins can be the difference maker.
Yeah, we're going to pivot to the NFC South pretty soon here.
But that, it's just, just Hopkins is, to me, so intriguing because he outperformed so many guys last year that played 17 games, and he only did it in 9. He's 32 years old. I think he's 32 years old this year, and he's still, even losing a step, he's still playing at such a
Hopkins is 31. He's not 32. You're off by a year. He's 6'92".
That even makes it better because he is still playing at such a high level. That is incredibly difficult. And I really think that if he plays all 17 games, he could exceed expectations. Now, the 2,000-yard thing, that was just me throwing a shot in the dark. It's like, could he reach it? I don't know. I think he could realistically, if he stays healthy, reach 1,700. I don't think that's out of the question. If, to your point, Tannehill's the one throwing on the ball.
Yeah.
Tannehill gets injured. Good Titan season's over. Go away. Nobody cares. You all failed. But if he stays healthy, he could be the X factor that puts them 8 wins. I think Chat Sports was saying that DeAndre Hopkins, based on his production last year, could be the difference between 2 wins. For most teams, based on production of receivers. So, I mean, it's realistic. It's a realistic possibility. Yep. Hopkins can be that X factor for the Titans.
Yes. I have we're going to pivot to the NFC South now. I have the Atlanta Falcons in third place at 6-11. I have the Falcons going 6-2 at home, but 0-9 on the road this year. I think Jordan Love and Kirk Cousins are the 2 quarterbacks I have handing Atlanta home losses. And with Ritter, he's a above average starter, good starter, maybe a great starter, but I don't think he's a Pro Bowl. I don't think he has the ceiling of a Pro Bowl quarterback or even a Hall of Fame quarterback or even a blue chip quarterback. I don't think Ritter has that type of ceiling.
The Hall of Fame is way below all pro, man. It's like Hall of Fame is way below all pro.
Yeah, right now I think Mahomes is probably the only quarterback that can be in the Hall of Fame conversation. Even that feels premature. It feels premature. I'm not saying it is like you would, but yeah.
Well, I always get on people for. I think I got on you a couple weeks ago for saying, generational talent, Hall of Fame talent. It's like no. Like I hate that. I hate putting that type of pressure on young guys. I hate putting that type. Now, if it was somebody that's at the end of their career,
And
like
Ritter for me is just an
TJ
above
Watt or
average,
something like
good,
that.
great
Okay.
starter. I don't see him as a guy with the. I don't see him as a quarterback that will ever have a rating above 90 in Madden, but I think he can be effective at times. I think he can make up to 4 progressions. He's solid, but at the same time, the Falcons don't have a good number 2 receiver. They have Drake London. They've got their 2 tight end set of Kyle Pitts and Jonnu Smith, and Mac Hollins, who was god-awful for the Raiders when Hunter Renfrow was injured, is their number 2. That, for me, is a deal breaker. That, for me, is why I cannot and will not pick the Falcons to win the division. I do think they go 6-2 at home. I think this is still a solid home team, but I have Atlanta finishing the year 6-11. And just looking at their depth chart, they've already got some injuries at corner. Both Jeffrey Okudah got carted off earlier this week, and Clark Phillips III are both injured at the moment. And with those injuries at corner, that is going to hurt the Falcons. I think they are going to have one of the best front sevens in the league. David Onyema, the Falcons are going to have one of the best front sevens in the league. I'll simply leave it at that, Joey, because I've already got my game write-up for Atlanta, Carolina type. Jake Matthews, Matthew Bergeron, Drew Dahlman, Lidstrom, and Caleb McGarry are your offensive linemen. You have Bijan Robinson, Cordell Patterson, Tyler Algier, 3 running backs that can get 1,000 rushing yards. And then you got David Onyemata, Grady Jarrett, and Calais Campbell as your defensive linemen. And right now, Bud Dupree and Arnold Ebiketie are the projected starters at outside linebacker. I was going to say, if they had planned on starting anybody else, I would have lost my shit. Atlanta's picked the 2 best edge rushers on their team to start. And if those are the 2 they start with, this front 7 will surprise people. And right now, Caden Ellis from the Saints and Troy Anderson, Montana State linebacker, are the 2 projected starters at inside linebacker. I would argue this is the best front 7 the Falcons have had since they made Super Bowl 51. They don't have that defensive architect at D coordinator like Dan Quinn, who was the head coach at the time when Shanahan was the offensive coordinator. But I would argue this is Atlanta's best front 7 since Super Bowl 51. And they've got Richie Grant, Jesse Bates III as their safeties. But with Okudah and Phillips injured at corner, I do think there's some limitations. I have Atlanta beating Carolina 23-19 in the Week 1 game. But I have Carolina, the next team we're going to preview, as my NFC South champion. Brian Bayless has the Saints winning the division. I think you have the Falcons winning the division. So everybody's all over the place with the NFC South. But I have the Panthers winning this division at 8-9. It's not an exciting division. It's probably the least exciting division in all of the NFL right now.
It is an unremarkable division. I believe I have the Falcons winning because they have the youngest core with the most talent in that core, probably in the NFC.
Well, I value the depth chart over star players.
I'm always looking.
And Bijan Robinson, to be fair, even though I picked the Falcons to win this division, I do have Bijan Robinson as our cover photo for Week 1 on Draft Utopia because the fans voted on Bijan Robinson as a rookie. It's never happened. We've never had a rookie player as the Week 1 cover photo for the website for NFL predictions. We've never had a rookie get the photo Week 1 coming out of the gate, but Bijan did it. Bijan Robinson actually did it. So congrats, Bijan.
And he is another one of those young, unproven talents. I think that's the thing that holds Atlanta back is that they're too young and too unproven. But they can prove themselves this year. They can win this division and prove they belong. Every team has to have a breakout year. I think Atlanta has the receivers. I think they have
one good receiver. I'm not sold on Mac Hollins. I'm not sold on Mac Hollins. I think he is awful. He did horrible when Renfrow got injured. If the Falcons had gotten a better free agent or drafted another receiver earlier, they did draft Marvin Mims in the 3rd round, but honestly, Mims should be their number 2 receiver. If it were up to me, he would be the number 2 receiver.
He very well may be the number 2 receiver. Atlanta has, not been as forthcoming with their depth chart as I would like. I think on their website they still have last year's depth chart.
No, they don't. They have this year's. I updated it. I updated it for the NFL predictions.
Oh, they actually do?
Yeah, because they have Bud Dupree and Ebiketie as the starter. Ebiketie was a backup last year as a rookie.
Okay.
He was a situational pass rusher.
Okay, because last time I checked, they still had last year's depth chart, so I'll check that again in a bit. So that's definitely good. Yeah, it's really interesting how they're going about things. But I think they have the young talent there, offensively and defensively.
I love Atlanta's front seven, but their lack of cornerback options without Okudah and Phillips. With Okudah and Phillips are injured in the regular season, that does not bode well. And if the number 2 receiver is, if their number 2 receiver is Mac Hollins, they're in trouble. So they might be able to start the year at a high level, but I don't know if they'll be able to finish it.
Yeah, I heard about Okudah a few days ago. I was kind of bummed about that because I thought he was set for a breakout season. Instead, he's injured for the second time in, I think, 3 years of his NFL career or whatever it is. So it sucks for him. Sucks for the Falcons. I really thought he was starting to come along. But I still think the Falcons maybe, at least as far as their
I think the Falcons are a year away. I'm not saying Desmond Ridder is a bust or ready to give up on him I'm not ready to give up on Desmond Ridder, but at the same time, if you get an opportunity to draft Penix or one of the top 3 quarterbacks, I'm not sure you can turn it down. But I have Atlanta at 6-11. I don't think they will be horrible, but I don't think they will be quite good enough to win the division. And I think that's a fair assessment. There are some people that have Atlanta at 4-3 wins. Chris Sims has Desmond Ridder as the 32nd best quarterback in the league. I think Ridder is he's quarterback 25 with the ceiling to be a top 20 quarterback. I don't think he's a top 15 quarterback or like you do, Joey, but I think he's a top 25 quarterback with the ceiling to be a top 20 quarterback, which I think is a fair, harsh, but fair evaluation. Whereas Sims is like, with Chris Sims, it's like Desmond Ridder's QB 32. With Chris Sims, Desmond Ridder is QB 32, the worst QB in the league. I don't agree with that at all, by the way.
That's not fair. That's harsh and just flat harsh. It's like, I think the Falcons could win this division with 7 to 8 wins. I agree with you. The Falcons would normally be a year away, but because this division just flat sucks.
I think there's one team in this division that doesn't completely suck, and that is the Carolina Panthers, the next team we're going to preview. I look at Bryce Young. I think Bryce Young's playing some of the best football I've seen in training camp. Christensen, Ekwonu, Bradley Bozeman at center. Cade Mays is taking over at right guard with Corbett injured, and Taylor Moton. Thielen's the number 1 receiver. Right now, Jonathan Mingo, the rookie they took in the 2nd round, is currently beating out both DJ Chark and Terrace Marshall Jr., last year's number 2 receiver, for the number 2 receiver job. There is a chance Jonathan Mingo is the number 1 receiver on this roster by the end of the year.
Well, that doesn't surprise me because I've been high on Mingo for like 3 years. It's like, for me, Mingo is just doing what I expected him to do.
With me, Mingo is fast, but he's not a really dominant route runner. He's fast. He gets a lot of separation, but he's not quite the route runner you'd like him to be. I know I'm a little critical on receivers that are not great route runners, but he has moments where he takes over games. It's just you haven't seen it on a consistent basis yet.
And that's what training camp's for. Teach these guys, especially the young guys. You got to be crisp with your routes. You got to, how not to round them off, and so on and so forth. That's what rookie camp's for. That's what, early as the training camp's for. When we're going to really find this stuff out,
Bird and LaVisca Chenault are wide receiver 5 and 6 on this depth chart. Hayden Hurst is the starting tight end. Ian Thomas is the number 2 tight end, but will be used in 2 tight end sets as last year's starting tight end. Miles Sanders is the number 1 running back, and Chuba Hubbard's the number 2 running back. Panthers switched from a 43 to a 34 defense. Brian Burns has experience at 34 outside linebacker, but the rest of Carolina's defense, not sure they have the experience to be in a 34 or 3-3-5 nickel defense. Carolina did make a really good free agent signing before training camp last week. Justin Houston is now on the Panthers. He was an unrestricted free agent. Carolina added him to pair with Brian Burns. So I think with him starting, Burns and Houston, that's a really good tandem, because now Yetur Gross-Matos is a backup, which I think is a much better role for him, situational pass rusher. And you also have Shaq Thompson and Frankie Louvu as your starting inside linebackers next to Houston and Burns. And it's possible that Jeremy Chin plays both dime linebacker as well as nickel corner. They might use Jeremy Chin as a linebacker on 34 plays and a nickel corner on nickel plays. That might be Jeremy Chin's role in his contract year, since Carolina went out and got Xavier Woods at free safety from Dallas and Von Bell at strong safety from Cincinnati.
Here's my thing with Carolina. I'm not sold on their defensive tackles. We saw last year.
I like Derek Brown.
Defensive tackle can be.
I like Derek Brown, but he is transitioning from 43 defensive tackle, where he played at Auburn in the NFL his entire career, to 34 right end, where Aaron Donald plays. He is transitioning to that role. They have Shy Tuttle next to him.
That's a tough transition.
They have Shy Tuttle next to Derek Brown. I like Shy Tuttle as a short-term starter, but he's a player you could upgrade down the road. But for 1 to 2 years during this rebuild, I don't think that's a bad move. But right now, the Panthers lack a nose tackle. Nose tackle is the worst position on the front 7 for Carolina at the moment. And it's a position they've got to fix, but they don't have a 2024 first-round pick thanks to the DJ Moore trade, thanks to the Bryce Young trade. So, they're in a tough spot.
And that's incredibly, that's probably the most important position in 3-4 is that guy who can take up 2 or 3 blockers.
And I'm trying to figure out why the Panthers aren't playing Derek Brown at nose tackle. I would play, if it were up to me, I would put Brown at nose tackle instead of 5 technique. But I don't understand what the Panthers are doing, Joey. I don't get it.
I don't either. And that's why I was going to say that their defense is not up to par, because I'm not exactly sure, because I know they've got a lot of talent on defense. Well, what the hell are they doing with the talent? Because literally they switched to a 3-4 defense, which they're not quick to run. They have no...
Outside of Brian Burns, none of their players have experience in the 34 defense. Outside of Brian Burns, who played a little bit of 43 and 34 at Florida State. Outside of Burns, they don't really have a guy that could play. And Justin Houston, maybe. Yeah. And Shaq Thompson. I think he played in both 43 and 34 defense. Outside of those 3 players, they really don't have a guy that translates the 34 defense outside of those 3 players. Yeah, maybe Shy Tuttle.
I'm like, what are they doing? Because I would have normally said the Falcons and Carolina are a toss-up if they would have stayed in a 43. Maybe the Panthers even would have won if they would have stayed in a 43. But what the hell are they doing in a 34? They don't have guys for a 34. They don't have anything that really fits.
I don't think that's a deal breaker for the Panthers like you do, because I like Carolina's weapons more than
deal breaker. It's not a deal breaker, but it doesn't have to be a deal breaker to cost you 1 or 2 games.
They have the Broncos defensive coordinator.
Because
Everett Evershow did a great job with the Broncos defensive coordinator last year, despite how
we did.
bad Nathaniel Hackett was. He's now the Panthers defensive coordinator. I trust him with this core of guys. So that's one of the reasons why I have the Panthers winning this division.
We agreed that was a great hire. It's not the coach or anything like that. It's the personnel alignment. I think they're going to have to, if they revamp their front three, then I think they'll be much better.
Yeah, and I've got Carolina finishing 8-9. I've got Carolina beating the Saints on Monday Night Football and then beating the Vikings. So I have Carolina at 2-4 heading into the bye week. I have them losing to the Texans. So I have Carolina starting the year 2-5 and then coming back to win the division. I've got them beating the Colts and the Bears on the road. I have Bryce Young making the Bears look stupid on Thursday Night Football for trading his rights away. I have the Cowboys beating Carolina. So Carolina then drops to 4-6. I have them losing to the Titans. So they're 4-7 after week 12, but then they beat Tampa Bay on the road to improve to 5-7. They lose to New Orleans. They're 5-8, but the Panthers, I have the Carolina Panthers winning 3 of their last 4 games. They get Atlanta at home on a Saturday. They get Green Bay at home. They get Tampa at home in the final 4 weeks. Their only tough game in the final 4 weeks is against Jacksonville in Jacksonville. So Carolina benefits from an easy strength of schedule to end the year. That's why I have them barely squeaking their way into the playoffs at 8-9.
Chris, now here's something that would. But how would you feel? How embarrassed will we both look if both Atlanta and Carolina finish 9-8? Just by chance.
Here's what actually happened. When I did my original rough draft before revising things and putting Tampa at 4-13, I had every team at 7-10. I had every single NFL team at 7-10 entering the final week of the season. It was pandemonium. It was chaos. And in that scenario, the Saints and Panthers came out as the 2-8-9 teams, and the Panthers won the tiebreaker. So I have the Panthers winning the division at 8-9. But yeah, it's going to be an uphill battle, and Carolina's a team that's probably not going to catch their stride until after the bye week in week 7. I think they'll win the division, but I also agree with you, Joey. They're not a team that's going to catch their stride until after the bye week in week 7. And I think they're going to be one of those teams in the final weeks of the season that's really going to surprise a lot of people.
Yeah, I think that I don't think either Atlanta or Carolina are going to catch their stride until later in the season because they're both so young. But it's going to be interesting to watch. It's not going to be exciting to watch. It's going to be like watching flies fuck to watch. But
I have Atlanta winning their final game in week 16. Because you look at Atlanta's final five games, they get Tampa at home, they get Carolina on the road, they get the Colts at home, they get the Bears on the road, and they get the Saints on the road in week 18 to end the year. And we're about to preview the Saints. So I have Atlanta winning against Tampa and Indy at home, but I have them losing those 3 road games to end the year. But I'm going to pivot to the Saints now. I have the Saints going 7-1 at home, but 0-9 on the road. But yeah, the Saints are interesting too because they're another one of these teams where if they can beat Green Bay in week 3, they can beat Carolina on Monday Night Football. They could be the team to beat in this division. They get the Patriots on the road. I have them losing to New England. I have New Orleans beating the Titans at home and then really not doing anything until they beat Tampa in week 4. And then I have the Saints losing 4 in a row from weeks 5 to 8 to go to 2-6 on the year. I have them beating the Bears, losing the Vikings, so they're 3-7 heading into the week 11 bye. Then they lose to Atlanta and drop to 3-8. And then they win 3 in a row against Detroit, Carolina, and the Giants at home. They lose to the Rams on Thursday Night Football. They lose to the Buccaneers late in the season. And then they beat Atlanta at home to end the year at 7-10. So they're an interesting team, I think. The Saints are a team to keep an eye on, Joey, as they're a team that can make things very interesting down the stretch. Derek Carr, Alvin Kamara is going to be suspended the first 3 games. So it's possible that without Alvin Kamara, Derrick Henry goes off and the Titans find a way to steal that game. And then they get the Panthers and the Packers without Kamara in those games. But they have Jamal Williams. They have Kendre Miller from TCU that they got in the draft. Michael Thomas is healthy. Chris Olave is healthy. Saints had one of the best defenses last year, but the problem is they couldn't stay healthy. And you've got Winston as your backup to Carr. So there's a lot of interesting storylines to look at with this New Orleans Saints team. But with Carl Granderson as the starting 43 right end, he's projected to start over some of the other rookies. I just think it's going to be really interesting to see what the Saints do, and can Trevor Penning steal that left tackle job from James Hurst and actually play a full season at left tackle? That's the other thing I'm looking at. If the Saints can answer those 2 questions, they could easily win this division. I know Brian Bayless has them winning the division. I think Orrin has the Saints winning this division as well. Bandel's kind of torn between the Saints and Panthers, but it's a coin flip for him. It is tough to say. There really isn't a consensus. I think most of us agree the Buccaneers are going to suck without and we'll get to the Buccaneers in a second. The Buccaneers are going to suck without Tom Brady, but you can't doubt Baker Mayfield. He looked pretty solid against the Steelers when watching him on NFL Network this morning. So, New Orleans is an interesting team.
Yeah, and that's the thing about Baker. If you put him in a position where people believe in him, he usually does well. But the second you make him feel like these people don't believe in me, these people don't like me, these people don't want me, he kind of checks out. So as long as they have his back, he's going to have theirs.
Yeah.
So there's room for optimism in Tampa Bay because of that. Because if you don't, he played his heart out for Cleveland, even with the shoulder hanging off his arm, hanging off his body. And then, but the second
both Baker Mayfield and Kyle Trask were overthrowing passes in minicamp. But the thing is, both of them looked surprisingly effective at times against the Steelers. And granted, it's only a preseason game.
And Trask, yeah, it is. But Trask is a guy I've always liked.
I had a backup grade on Trask heading into the draft.
But he's always been that steady hand. He's not going to do a bunch of stupid shit. He's not going to lose you the game. He's not he is that steady hand.
I had the same grade on Kyle Trask that I had on Paxton Lynch, 83 out of 99. Anything below an 85 is a backup for me. But 83 is a high-end backup, and as long as you're 80 or higher, I think Joey's willing to give you a chance as the starter at some point. But
I am. It's like
I'm a little bit tougher.
I'm not going to dismiss somebody who has starter potential. Even if you're not necessarily a starter, if you have starter potential, I'm not going to give up on you.
Yeah, like for me, anything below 85 is a backup. But for Joey, anything above an 80 is good enough to get a shot as a starter. Not good enough necessarily to keep your job, but good enough to get a shot at some point.
Yeah, it's like the best example I can give is Colt McCoy. I beat the table. Give him a shot. Give him a shot because he was at that point where, hey, he could be an effective starter.
Colt McCoy had some great runs in the Broncos game last night.
Absolutely not.
Colt McCoy had some great runs in the Broncos game last night. I've got New Orleans at 7-10. They have Lattimore. They have Paulson Adebo, Alontae Taylor. They have a lot of good cover corners. Tyrann Mathieu, I think, is I don't know if Tyrann Mathieu's still on the Saints or if he tested free agency or what ended up happening with him.
I don't remember.
I'm going to pull up the Saints. Saints.
But Colt's been around for 13 years as a spot starter and as a high-end backup. So it's like I wasn't wrong to give him a chance to start.
Yeah, they have Matthew and Marcus May.
Starter.
Tyrann Mathieu and Marcus May are the starters in New Orleans. But yeah, Granderson's the starting right end, replacing Davenport. I don't know how that's going to turn out because he's ahead of Peyton Turner, Tano Capassignon, and Isaiah Foskey. Saints' second-round pick out of Notre Dame on the depth chart. Colin Saunders and Nathan Shepard, the two defensive tackles that were backups on the Jets in Kansas City. I always thought those two were good enough to start, and now they're going to get the opportunity to start with the Saints. Warner, Demario Davis, and Zach Bonner, good linebackers. So overall, I am pretty high on the Saints' defense, but can Derek Carr, because Penning, Pete, Eric McCoy, Cesar Ruiz, Ryan Ramczyk, those are the offensive line starters. Can this offensive line gel? Can Olave and Thomas both stay healthy? And can Kamara stay out of trouble when he returns from his suspension? Because there's a lot of talent on the Saints, and they could very easily be the team that wins this division if Atlanta or Carolina doesn't. Final thoughts on the Saints before we get to Tampa and break them down a little bit further.
Yeah, I always thought that Carolina, that New Orleans, I thought Honey Badger, Tyrann Mathieu had retired. I did think he retired this season.
I thought he retired too because it was March or April, and I read an article saying he was at the Applebee's in Pittsburgh. No joke. He was at the Applebee's in McCandless, which is right near my old high school, North Allegheny. He was actually at the freaking Applebee's in McCandless. So I'm thinking, okay, maybe he's going to sign with the Steelers, but he ends up going to New Orleans. Maybe this was last year. I don't remember.
But my thought was, after you said that he was still playing for New Orleans, I was like, okay, I'm excited because I thought he still had a lot in the tank. Yeah. I think he still has a lot to give. So I'm glad he's still playing. I'm glad for New Orleans. I think New Orleans is one of those teams that they could shock some people. I think Derek Carr has always gotten a bad rap his entire career.
Yep.
No matter what's happened, what he's done, how good he's been, people forget 3-4 years ago, he was one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL.
Derek Carr had 3 different head coaches and 5 different offensive coordinators. And then Mark Davis and McDaniels were like, we're moving on. We need a fresh start.
Yeah, and
I don't think Carr was the problem. It's been the coaching with the Raiders. It's been the coaching in the front office.
It was the organization.
Yeah.
And now you got a stable organization. You got a situation going down that's really good for him.
And John Gruden's been actually at some of the Saints practices this year, giving Carr some pointers and advice as like a consultant. He's not coaching. He's just...
Yeah. Yeah, he's been helped because I know he and John Gruden have an incredible relationship. When everybody else gave up on him, Gruden was the one that said, no, he's good. He's our guy. So he and Gruden have a great relationship. I wouldn't doubt if he works with Gruden during the offseason. I would not doubt that. I think he is a very good quarterback who has been put in a horrendous situation. And I think if Gruden, because he had that year of his career under Gruden where he was a top 5 quarterback.
I think if Dennis Allen could legally hire John Gruden as his offensive coordinator, he would. He would do it right now. But because of the bounty gate and because of way Gruden burned bridges with the emails.
But unfortunately, because of the lawsuits going on and everything, because let's face it, the NFL used John Gruden as a scapegoat because they wanted to divert attention away from the ownership. It didn't work, and it cost them a lot of lawsuits that are still ongoing with John Gruden.
Yep.
So the most Gruden can do is come in and give his advice and help tutor guys in an unofficial capacity. It's unfortunate because John Gruden's one of the best offensive minds and one of the best motivators that the NFL has had in the last 20, 25 years.
And I don't agree with the Buccaneers' decision to remove him from the Ring of Honor. I think that was a coward's move. I understand why the team did it. They didn't want to face backlash or be associated with Gruden. But I would not have removed him from the Ring of Honor because he brought you your first Super Bowl. He got you your first Super Bowl.
Yeah, it was a. I don't think it was necessarily a decision made by the franchise as much as it was a decision made by those pressuring the other owners, pressuring them to do it because we need to make this guy look as bad as possible, or else, Dan Snyder, who is not an owner, who sold out to Magic Johnson and his team, is, now being looked at. Now the only one left is John Gruden. And Gruden knows I'm never getting back in, so I'm going to take you guys down with me. Because I know I can take you down. Because what's going to happen in this position, because I do not believe it's gone to disposition yet, which is the term period that where they do all the research, all those emails, all those documents, all
a whole legal process. They're still going through it. It's ongoing. It's still ongoing. But how many wins do you think the Saints get this year?
How many wins do I think the Saints get this year? That's tough because I think their offense is going to be ahead of the curve. I think their defense is potentially going to be behind the curve.
The reason I didn't like the Saints last year is because James Hurst was at left tackle instead of Penning, and Andy Dalton was starting at quarterback. Those two issues have been resolved. And now that I know that, I wouldn't be surprised if the Saints won this division instead of Carolina. But I'm still picking Carolina to win this division.
I wouldn't be surprised if the Saints won it. But I think the Saints defense is still a little bit of I think the Saints resolve their offensive issues. I think their defensive issues are going to be...
I don't think they have any defensive issues, Joey. I think their defense is one of the best in the league. When their defense is fully healthy, their defense was fully healthy for 2 games. When their defense was fully healthy, the Eagles could not score on New Orleans in Philly.
When their defense was fully healthy for 2 games,
they were amazing. They were giving up under 20 points a game.
2 games.
Yeah, when Lattimore came back, Saints had a fully healthy defense for at least 2 games this season, and they won both of those games. Because they were having injuries at corner with Alontae Taylor to begin the year, and then Paulson Adebo got injured, and then Lattimore got injured. And it was just a rotation of which corner. If the corners are healthy, New Orleans is going to have the best defense in this division outside of maybe Carolina. Because right now, New Orleans and Carolina both have better cornerback depth than Atlanta. With the injuries to Okudah and Clark Phillips right now, New Orleans and Carolina have the best depth at corner. I'm not sure who the edge rusher is replacing Davenport. That's really my only question with the Saints defense. And it's the biggest reason why I gave Carolina the South. But you think 7-10 could be realistic. But I think you had Atlanta at 10-7. And then
I think New Orleans could realistically potentially win 9 games. Realistically, and this is the thing. I don't think as highly of New Orleans defense as you do. Because you said they were healthy for 2 games and won both games last year. What they do, that's 2 out of 17. What about the other 15? Stay healthy, stay solid, then we'll talk.
Cameron Jordan,
And
they didn't have the Saints had horrible defensive tackle play last year, Joey. That's part of the reason why their defense sucked. They added Colin Saunders and Nathan Shepard, two backups from the Chiefs and Jets, and who are now starting. They also have Brian Bressie, their first-round pick, as a rotational piece, and they've also got Malcolm Roach as their number 4 defensive tackle. So I do think the Saints are going to be a lot better at defensive tackle. Defensive tackle was my big issue with New Orleans last year. And with Pete Werner, Demario Davis, and Zach Bond fully healthy, DeMarco Jackson's going to get more reps this year in year 2 as the Appalachian State linebacker. I do like Adebo, Alante Taylor, and Lattimore as their top 3 corners. I think that's a cornerback trio that can work quite effectively. And really, the Saints had issues at defensive tackle for years, and they finally fixed that. So,
yeah, my big issue with the Saints defense is that they're never healthy. If they're never healthy, they're never effective. If they, to your point, if they can be healthy, now we're having a different discussion.
Because Lattimore got injured in like week 7, week 8, week 9, and didn't come back till week 14 or 15. Once that happened, it just felt like all the morale with the Saints was gone for the year. All the morale with that defense was gone for the year.
Yeah, a healthy Saints defense is a strong Saints defense. A Saints defense that's banged up, I'm not a fan of their depth, except for defensive tackle. Like you said, they did a good job defensive tackle. Not a fan of their depth.
I like DeMarco Jackson coming out of Appalachian State, and I like Peyton Turner as a backup edge rusher. But right now they have Lonnie Johnson Jr. and Abram as their backup safeties to Marcus May and Matthew. I'm not a fan of that. Right now their number 4 corner is
backup safeties.
Right now their number 4 corners are Isaac Yiadom and Bradley Roby. Those are the guys competing for the number 4 cornerback job. I'm not a fan of either of those guys. So I like DeMarco Jackson as a backup middle linebacker, but the backup outside linebackers are Nephi Sewell, Noah Sewell's older brother, and Ryan Connolly. I like DeMarco Jackson as a backup to Demario Davis, but that's the only backup I like.
Credit, though. I will give the Saints corners credit. They are better than, say, the Texans' number 4 corner. You know, what was his name again?
Shaquille Griffin.
So I will give them credit. They are better than that.
Okay, we got one more team to preview. It is the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and then we will be ready to sign off this live stream. I am going to turn my TV on because I believe the Titans-Bears game is set to kick off soon on NFL Network. I'll mute my TV, but I am going to turn it on. But yeah, the Buccaneers, I have them at 4-13. I originally had them at 6-11. I think you had them at 9-8 as your final wild card, Joey. And I originally gave the Buccaneers a week 2 win over the Bears, but I was like, nah, that's just not realistic. Baker Mayfield and Trask were just so bad during OTAs and mini camps. I just sort of dismissed my initial 6-11 prediction and said, you know what, we're going to make this team 4-13 instead. It's just not a good combination, but we'll see what happens. But yeah, it is. They're having Mariucci break down Will Levis and Justin Fields for this preseason game that's about to start between the Titans and Bears on NFL Network. And yes, you'll get to see the Jets play the Panthers today. So some of the teams we're previewing, you'll get to see those teams on NFL Network. The Panthers play at 4. The Titans play now. Eagles play the Ravens later tonight, and then Chargers and Rams wrap up the quadruple header on NFL Network. And now they're showing Malik Willis. I think kickoff's actually starting for that game, Joey, but Let's quickly break down the Buccaneers. I love Godwin and Evans as receivers. I think Rachaad White's decent. Wirfs is transitioning from right tackle to left tackle. And the Buccaneers rested a lot of their defensive starters in the preseason, hoping to avoid injuries. Devin White wants to be the highest paid linebacker. Look, Devin White was great in Super Bowl 55, but like, he thinks he deserves more money than Roquan Smith? No, motherfucker. You don't deserve more money than Roquan Smith. Get the hell out of here. I'm not paying you more than Roquan Smith. If you think you deserve that, I don't know what to tell you. I don't know what to tell Devin White. Because it's like Levante David, many people think Levante David's past his prime, but like he's willing to take cheap team-friendly deals. And that's why the Buccaneers keep bringing him back. I think Levante David last year, Levante David only made like $2.5 or $3 million. This year, he's only making like $1 million or $1.5 million. You can say what you want about Levante David, but the fact that he's willing to take those team-friendly deals is why the Buccaneers keep bringing him back. And Devin White, it's like he wants more money than Roquan Smith, and he keeps missing tackles. No. That's not how this works.
Look fondly on those players. Those players that take the team-friendly deals because they want to be there, because they believe in the team. They believe in the – it's the old thing that I used to say about Joe Thomas. I'm like, why the hell is he still around? Because he loved the city. He loved the team. He wanted to stay there. And I will always hold respect for any player that says, we may be on hard times. Things may not be going great. But I want to be here because I love the organization. I love the team. I love the city. I will always hold those players in far higher respect than I do the players that would hold a team up for money just because.
Look, like, Chris Jones wants $30 million a year, but like, here's the thing. Right now, the highest paid center in the NFL is Jason Kelce. He's making $14,250,000. If you can get Creed Humphrey for $14.5 million or $15 million for 6 or 7 years, you'd rather do that than pay Chris Jones $30 million a year when he's approaching his late 20s, early 30s. That's just the business, Joey.
Yeah.
That's just the business side of the negotiations. If you can get Nick Bolton to agree to a 4-year extension for under $10 million a year, like the one Logan Wilson just got in Cincinnati, you're going to prioritize that over paying Chris Jones $30 million a year, especially with Bolton coming off 2 100-seat tackle seasons. That's just the nature of this business. If you can get Trey Smith to take a deal like that, where he's making under $10 million for 4 or 5 years over what Chris Jones is projected to make it $30 million, you're going to prioritize that as well. I'm not saying the Chiefs aren't willing to pay Chris Jones over $20 million a year. I just don't know if they're willing to pay him $30 million, which is what Tyreek Hill wanted. Because Kelce,
yeah, we're not saying that he potentially isn't worth that to his team. But what we're saying is that we would prioritize, loyalty of a player to the team and to the city over somebody who wants that much more money, because we can bring in somebody who could be maybe not equal, but be comparative to the production. And having somebody who is loyal to the city, the team, the locker room, so on and so forth, and willing to take a team-friendly deal because of it, will help with the culture of the team, which will help the team in the long run overall.
The 2 longest tenured players on defense on the teams that drafted them in the 2012 NFL draft, I think the only other defensive player from the 2012 NFL draft that's still with the team that drafted him outside of Fletcher Cox is Levante. I could be wrong on that, Joey, but I believe he might be the only player outside of Fletcher Cox on defense that's still with the team that drafted him.
Yeah, because I didn't, because Fletcher Cox has been such a great player for so long, I forgot that he's been in the league for a long time, and he's been with the Eagles for a long time.
But Levante David's in the same category. He's been with the Buccaneers since 2012 out of Nebraska, and he's still with the Buccaneers.
He is. And that is rare to see these days.
And the scary thing is the Buccaneers took Mark Barron over Levante David. They took Mark Barron over Fletcher Cox. If they had taken Fletcher Cox at 9, they would have had a reincarnation of Warren Sapp and Derek Brooks, potentially. They could have recreated that post-Sapp.
Yeah, let's face it. I think Derek Cox is still one of the better defensive tackles in the NFL. Still one of my favorites. And he's been in the league for almost 12 years now. He's been a very, very good defensive tackle for a very, very long time. And there was a time, whether people remember it or not, when we would sit here and say, Fletcher Cox or Aaron Donald. Aaron Donald has since, well blown past him, obviously, because he's Aaron Donald and he is the football equivalent of, probably Thanos. But at the same time, Fletcher Cox, there was a time when he and Aaron Donald were neck and neck.
I would say this was around 2016 or 2017 when Cox was still in his prime, but that's probably...
It was a few years back.
Yeah,
it was a few years back.
Was in that discussion too, but
like you said, when Cox was still in his prime, when he was in his prime, he was a force.
Yeah, it looks like the Bears. Kyler Gordon just forced a fumble, and it looks like the Bears have recovered the fumble. But it's interesting. Malik Willis is starting over Coffee and Mayonnaise Man. I'm not even going to refer to Will Levis as Will Levis. I'm just going to say Coffee and Mayonnaise Man is on the bench. I wonder if he's putting mayonnaise in teammates' Gatorade bottles. That would be pretty disgusting.
But you just gave me an idea. The Mannings bring in Fletcher Cox after next year to be the third person in their booth as they are commentating games. I'm not sure whether that would be good or not, but it would be sure as hell be interesting.
Yeah. But the Buccaneers, I have them at 4-13. I initially had them at 6-10. I think they beat Atlanta and Detroit in week 6 and 7. That's when I have the Buccaneers getting their first win following the bye week. They get 2 weeks to prepare for Dan Campbell. I think they beat Campbell in week 6, and then I think they win in week 7 against Atlanta. I have them beating the Titans in week 10. And then I have the Buccaneers beating the Saints in week 17 in a pretty meaningless late season game. And those are the 4 games I have the Buccaneers winning. I think it's going to be a long year for the Buccaneers. But, Mike Evans, if Mike Evans can have another 1,000-yard receiver, because remember, Mike Evans had 1,000 yards as a rookie with Josh McCown and Mike Glennon splitting reps. Then he had 1,000 yards with Winston. Then he had 1,000 yards the last 2 or 3 years with Tom Brady. If he can do that, he's never had a season where he's had under 1,000 receiving yards. If Evans does that with Baker Mayfield, he is a Hall of Famer as far as I'm concerned. In fact, I would argue that Mike Evans is the one receiver in the current NFL era who can actually make a case for getting into Canton, because 8 1,000-yard seasons and a Super Bowl ring, that is good enough by today's standards to get into Canton. Him and Tyreek Hill are really the only two that could make a case right now. Cooper Kupp maybe down the road, but it's a wait and see. There's really...
For me, I do like the Buccaneers I do like it because, the Bucs came out and got Baker Mayfield. They say, we want you to succeed Tom Brady. Yes, we're going to have you compete with Kyle Trask, but we want you to be the starter. Trask can come in and start. I do like the fact because that boosts up Baker's ego, which is something, even as a Baker fan myself, I will say his ego is fragile. So boost up his ego, that's when he plays best. Then you have the two receivers, which still to this day, when healthy, probably the best receiver tandem in football.
Yeah, Evans and
They have
Godwin's a heck of a
very good
receiver
tight end
tandem.
and Tyler Brait.
Actually, Kate Otton's a starting tight end for Tampa Bay. They moved on from Cameron Brait. But Kate Otten, because Kate Otten, Kate Otten, their 2022 fourth-round pick, took over as the starting tight end in the second half of the season. And I think Brady actually, I'm not sure if it's true or not, but like I read some crazy tweet where Brady was telling him not to go to his mom's funeral. I don't believe that. I think that's horse crap. But Kate Otten, he had the situation, and then he became the starting tight end for Tampa in the second half of the season. Rachaad White became the starting running back.
Wow.
They got Shaq Barrett. They've got some pieces. But, yeah, I mean, the Buccaneers are an interesting team for sure.
Because I think they are uber talented. And I do think that they have all the makings of a very good team. They're one of those teams that
I think Tampa Bay is going to be much tougher defensively. I think Tampa Bay's defense is going to keep them in a lot of games this year, Joey, because they got Kalijah Kancey. Kalijah Kancey was getting triple teamed at Pittsburgh. The last defensive lineman at Pittsburgh to get a triple team, I think, was Aaron Donald. I mean, Kancey was taking on triple teams in the West Virginia film cut I did of Kalijah Kancey in the backyard brawl. And now you have him with Vita Vea. So now you won't be able to double team Vita Vea or even triple team Vita Vea. Because if Kancey took on some triple teams at West Virginia and Vita Vea took on some triple teams with the Buccaneers, if you triple team Kancey, it opens things up for Vea. And if you do the same with Vea, it opens things up for Kancey. And you have Logan Hall, the second round pick the Buccaneers got from the trade with the Jaguars when Jacksonville moved up for Devin Lloyd. So Logan Hall, Kalijah Kancey, and Vita Vea. That's going to be a nice pair on the Tampa Bay Buccaneers 34 defensive line.
Chris, I know why now that Cameron Brait was let go from Tampa Bay and why he still hasn't signed. Have you seen that fucking mustache of his? That thing is horrific.
Is it worse than Paxton Lynch's mustache when he entered the 2016 NFL draft?
It is, yeah. It is, it makes an Italian look up and say, holy shit, what did you do to your face? It is horrific. Holy crap.
I gotta look this up.
Joey. What did you do to yourself?
Malik Willis got a rushing touchdown. I'm gonna look up the Buccaneers depth chart. Yeah, the Cameron Brait. It honestly, I can't even tell if this is Cameron Brait or if this is the Pringles man. This honestly looks like the Pringles, the Pringles guy. That's how big Cameron Brait's mustache is. I honestly, I can't tell if it's him or the Pringles guy. Like, if you put Cameron Brait next to a can of Pringles, I couldn't tell the difference.
He is completely unrecognizable from when he was one of those guys who, I saw as one of the most underutilized tight ends.
Yeah, and Joe Tryan's entering. Joe Tryan was the Buccaneers' 2021 first-round pick. He's entering his second year as a starter after sitting behind Jason Pierre-Paul his rookie year. So I think with Shaq Barrett and Tryan, White, David, I think this front seven with Logan Hall, Vea, and Kancey is going to be very good. Now, Carlton Davis is still the number one corner. I don't agree with the Buccaneers' decision to make Jamel Dean their nickel corner, number two corner. But Zion McCollum's going to be the nickel corner. Zion McCollum, he showed some potential and limited action as a rookie. And pairing with Antoine Winfield Jr. is Ryan Neal, who is great at strong safety for Seattle last year during their playoff run when Jamal Adams was injured. So I really like the Ryan Neal free agency move. I think the Buccaneers, if their defense can stay healthy, this is a team that can surprise people because I think this is the best defense that Baker Mayfield's had since the Browns made the playoffs. I honestly believe that, Joey. Now, are the corners stars like Denzel Ward was? No. I don't think either corner's on Denzel Ward's level, but I think this is the best supporting cast on defense Baker Mayfield's had since his playoff season with the Browns. And that says a lot, because
I think so too. And let's face it, this is last year. Baker was still recovering from a torn labrum that J.J. Watt decided, you know what? Potentially torn labrum's not bad enough. Let's rip it completely off the freaking bone. And J.J. Watt, got up off Baker Mayfield and actually thought he killed the guy. And he said that in an interview that he thought he'd killed him. That's just how gutsy he is and how much he played through. And last year, at the end of the year, he played much better than he did at the beginning of the year with Carolina.
Yeah, and Tampa Bay, my big question with Tampa Bay are on the offensive line. They're moving Wirfs from right tackle to left tackle with Donovan Smith gone. They're moving Luke Godecki, who was awful at left guard, over to right tackle where he played at Central Michigan. They're moving Cody Mock to right guard. Cody Mock can play all 5 positions in the offensive line, but I would think he's a little bit more qualified to start at right tackle than Godecki. But it is what it is. I'm not going to fault the Buccaneers. If they think he's better fit at guard than tackle,
absolutely not.
I'm not going to fault them for that. Maybe Godecki rebounds at right tackle. And they've got Ryan Jensen fully healthy at center. And Matt Filer, the Chargers left guard, is now the Buccaneers left guard. So my big question with the Buccaneers is offensive line. I think the defense is steady. The receivers, if Evans and Godwin are healthy, can keep them in games. I like Cade Otton. He really surprised me in the second half of the year. I didn't think he would come in and have the impact he did. And they've got Rashad White at running back. So, and also the Buccaneers. I've got some news on Sean Tucker. Last week, Sean Tucker was medically cleared by doctors to practice. So Sean Tucker can play at running back now. He's been medically cleared by doctors after the heart condition caused him to go undrafted. He's been medically cleared by doctors to practice with Tampa. So that's great news. We're happy for Sean Tucker. And, yeah. But with the Buccaneers, my big question's their offensive line. Like, Tony Mario just wants the team to tank and get a good quarterback.
We have to look at it the way it is.
But I don't know if the Buccaneers are going to necessarily be
wide receiver group that Baker Mayfield's played with, and it's the worst offensive line group he may have played with. So we're looking at it, and the Buccaneers did as good as they could to rebound off a disappointing season with the Hall of Fame quarterback. And the Hall of Fame quarterback ended up retiring. It was still a disappointing season, and they did their best to rebound, and they did probably as good as
I don't know if there's going to be a game where Baker Mayfield gets 30 points with this offense, but there are going to be games where the Buccaneers defense gives up only 10 to 20 points a game, where Baker Mayfield just has to manage the game, make it look natural. And if he does that, the Buccaneers should win, because there are going to be games where this defense is on, unlike last year where the defense stumbled out of the gate. And I do like the Buck.
Remember, Baker is a streaky quarterback. So you're going to have to get more of those hot streaks than you do the cold streaks. Yep. And the defense, like you said, is good enough to carry them during his cold streaks. But you're going to have to get more of the hot streaks than you do the cold streaks. And that's the big thing, because with streaky quarterbacks like that, you have to have a good team around them.
And I do think the Buccaneers defense can carry them. But my issue with the Buccaneers has to be the offensive line. It's not really an issue as much as it is a question mark. With Wirfs, can he transition to left tackle? That's the first and probably the biggest question mark. Can Godecki rebound at right tackle after being god-awful at left tackle? He had a 2.4 pass blocker rating on Pro Football Focus last year at left guard, which was worst among every guard in the entire NFL as a rookie. So can he rebound at right tackle? Can Cody Mock play well enough to maybe steal the right tackle job from Godecki? That would be my third question. Can Ryan Jensen stay healthy? And can Matt Filer actually play all 17 games at left guard like he did with the Chargers last year, and play at a high level for the Buccaneers. So there are questions everywhere on the offensive line right now.
Well,
Tony Mario's saying he wants the Buccaneers to do awful and tank for a top 3 draft pick and get Caleb Williams or Drake May. He's on all the draft simulators, and he's trying to make sure the Buccaneers get one of those 2 quarterbacks. I don't know if that will be bad enough to get either of those 2, to be completely honest.
In the same token, if Baker Mayfield doesn't pan out, then there's no guarantee that they won't get a very good quarterback regardless. And if he does pan out, who's to say that they don't get an offensive lineman to help keep him healthy? Because this year's, like we discussed with the Pac-12, this year's quarterback class is pretty darn good.
Yeah, the Seahawks quarterbacks coach took an offensive coordinator gig with the Buccaneers. So if the Buccaneers make the playoffs, their offensive coordinator is getting a head coaching job, because any Buccaneers, I'm not sure if he was the Seahawks offensive coordinator last year, but I'm going to type in the Buccaneers offensive coordinator really quickly, and then we will end the podcast, because we're at that point. Dave Canales, I like Dave Canales. Dave Canales was the quarterbacks coach for Geno Smith. So he'll say, I was the quarterbacks coach for Geno Smith. If Dave Canales can take Geno, I think that's partially why Canales got promoted from quarterback coach to offensive coordinator. It's like, you took Geno to the playoffs as a quarterbacks coach and revived his career. Now, if you do the same thing with Baker Mayfield for a second year in a row, I would think at that point he's in the driver's seat to get a head coaching gig, Joey. I would think if Canales can go from taking Geno Smith and making him a Pro Bowler as a quarterback coach, and then doing the same thing with Baker as an offensive coordinator, I would think at that point Canales is pretty much guaranteed a head coaching job at some point down the road.
Yeah, because you recognize the best years of Baker Mayfield's career. First year with Kevin Stefanski when he was completely healthy. The time when he was with Todd McShay with the Rams. And now you're with a guy who turned Geno Smith into one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL after nearly 8 years of mediocrity. Okay? So this may just be the match made in heaven for the Bucs. And if that is true, well, the Bucs might actually end up winning this division because of the guy who you say is probably going to end up being a head coach next year if that comes to pass. Because if you take that many quarterbacks and you turn them into all pros and turn around careers, what team isn't going to want to hire you? So, yeah, it's like if that happens, who are we to argue if he ends up getting a head coaching job?
Yeah. And that would really be my main argument here. It's 2nd and 6. Will Levis is in the game. Coffee and Mayonnaise Man is throwing passes, and Coffee and Mayonnaise Man threw a completion to Nick Akine Westbrook. And NFL Network decides to show off the Bears-Panthers trade because they refuse to show any good plays of Will Levis. They just want to recap the DJ Moore-Bryce Young trade instead of giving Will Levis credit for that completion in the preseason. And Malik Willis ran for a touchdown. It's 7-7 between the Titans and Bears. We'll recap this drive here, and then we will wrap things up. Will Levis, play action. Levis drops back. He threw it into coverage, but number 29 could not hold on to the Tyreek Stevenson. He had the deflection, but he could not make the interception. So Tyreek Stevenson had an opportunity to intercept Will Levis. He just could not complete the catch. His teammates were giving him a pat on the back and encouraging him for the deflection, but he felt kind of disappointed. He felt like he let the team down.
I didn't know Will Levis shit. Until Will Levis shows me something. Anybody who would ruin coffee with mayonnaise, they got a long uphill climb to deal with it.
Levis hands off to Hassan Haskins. And number 99 with the tackle for the Chicago Bears. Who's that? Number 99. That is Tashawn Gibson, the former Tulsa defensive end that's no longer a starting defensive end on the Bears, thanks to the Bears signings of DeMarcus Walker and Yannick Ngakoue. So Gibson with a nice tackle here. We will recap the drive of Coffee and Mayonnaise Man, and then we will end the podcast. Because we're at the point where we're ready to end the podcast, and everything's ran pretty smoothly on live Restream and TalkShoe. And Coffee and Mayonnaise Man is sacked by number 96. Who is that who brought him down? Number 96 for the Bears. Who is that who just sacked Who is that? Is that Dexter? Who the heck is 96? Or 90?
I know Dexter was drafted by him. I don't know who. I didn't know what number he's got yet.
No, that's Zach Pickens, the fourth-round pick out of South Carolina. Zach Pickens takes down Will Levis. So, wow, Zach Pickens. Zach Pickens was my number 5 defensive tackle. Dexter was my number 3 defensive tackle. So, Zach Pickens sacked Levis.
He was the guy. He was the guy that you got me to watch extra tape of, and I kind of grew on. So, congratulations to Zach Pickens.
Yep, and he got a third down sack on Will Levis. So, that's what we're saying. It's like, that's what we want to see from him and Dexter. And then Dexter basically came up from behind and was all fired up and gave Pickens a hug after the sack or something. It's kind of fun to see these second-team Bears players against Will Levis. But yeah, that is pretty much going to wrap it up for this podcast. That is Joseph Potter. I'm Chris Ransom. We will be back next Saturday to preview the Big Ten, the AFC East, and the NFC East. And spoiler alert, you will get my potential AFC and NFC champions next week. I know Joey has the Jaguars and Lions in his Super Bowl. We talked about the Jaguars today. We talked about the Lions last week. But yeah, you'll get that next Saturday. And yeah, so that's Joseph Potter. I'm Chris Ransom. We're signing off. Enjoy your Saturday afternoons and preseason coverage. So long.